A Charming Misfortune, a cozy paranormal mystery, a Magical Cures Mystery Series, Book 12, written by Tanya Kappas, narrated by Karen Savage. Chapter 1. Why are you still out? The fireflies darted around Mr. Prince Charming and me as we made our way down the hill toward the town of Whispering Falls. The light orange tint of a hint of dawn illuminated over the hills that hid our magical little town from the real world. "Shouldn't you be going to bed?" I asked them, knowing they were the souls of the teenagers that had left this world too early and came back in the form of the lightning bugs. Really, it made perfect sense if you sat down and truly thought about it. Teenagers love to stay up all night and sleep all day, so it was perfect that they should come back to Earth in the form of the cute little nightly creatures who seemed to have a field day tormenting my fairy godcat, Mr. Prince Charming. Meow! Mr. Prince Charming swatted a couple of fireflies before he darted down the hill faster than I was walking. "Now see what you did?" I scolded the teens. "He's going to be aggravated all day long. Shame on you." They whizzed behind me, heading toward the woods, lighting a long path with their tails. I turned around and watched them circle my house and disappear. "Cuckoo, cuckoo," said the faint voice from the bag I'd strapped across my shoulder. Purple, pink, and orange lit up the bag so brightly that the light helped navigate a path through the grassy field and into the sidewalk on the cobblestone street. "Yes, teens can be a little odd," I said to the light, knowing it was Madame Torres, my crystal ball. "We don't have time for them." A twinge hit my gut. I stopped. I looked both ways down the street to see if something there turned on my intuition. I sucked in a deep breath, lifted my shoulders to my ear, and then let it out. "Yes, Madame Torres, it's going to be a busy day." Something in the air told me so, and it wasn't the warm smell of cinnamon and sugar spilling out of Wicked Good Bakery, or the mix of incense curling around Eloise sandalwood. Early morning. Eloise stopped in front of me. She continued to swing the light lantern with its special protection powers to and fro. Her short red hair really contrasted with the dark green cloak draped over her shoulders. Her emerald eyes twinkled. "You are out early." Eloise was an incense spiritualist. Her job in Whispering Falls was to cleanse our magical town every morning before dawn. Her practice helped ward off any evil spirits and keep our secret community safe from the outside world. Not that we were bad, but some people didn't like our way of life. Like our ancestors before us, we'd be hung in the middle of town for telling the future or using our special gifts, as we like to refer to our talents. I, June Heel, was a homeopathic spiritualist. I created special potions to help customers in their daily lives. Oscar had to go to work early, so I thought I might as well get a jump on things. I glanced around, trying to look to see where Mr. Prince Charming had run off to, but the street lights weren't bright enough for me to see too far in front of me. "My nephew is always hard at work." She smiled and swung the lantern toward the police department a little farther down the street. Oscar Park, a wizard, was not only our town officer, but he was also my husband. He loved his job to keep law and order in our little town. Though Eloise and I might be biased, he was very good at his job. "I must go." Eloise glanced toward the mountains. "The dawn is yawning." It was always interesting for me to watch the other spiritualists in the community use their gifts. We were all different, which was what made our little town feel so magical to the tourists who loved to visit our shops. Our town was the perfect place for friends to come and shop, or even for a romantic vacation. "Cuckoo, cuckoo," Madame Torres chirped from the bag. "Stop that," I protested. "Eloise is not cuckoo. She's amazing." Why on earth would Madame Torres say that? The question crossed my mind but floated away as soon as I saw Raven Mortimer tossing some dough in the air through the Wicked Good Bakery window. The logo on the window made it hard for her to see me, and I did need to grab the June's gems for the day. I gathered my cloak around my legs and darted across the street, exposing my laced-up black boots. The click of my heels echoed off the shops. Faith looked up and out the windows. A smile curled on the edges of her lips, and her black eyes sparkled as she waved me in. "Ah, just in time," she greeted me with a cheerful voice. "I just took out the June's gems, but Faith would have brought them down for you." Oscar had to work early, so I figured I'd get a jump on the day. Glancing around the charming confectionery, I couldn't help but think how far our relationship had come. Faith and Raven were sisters. We'd met while attending Hidden Hall, a spiritualist university. They were classmates in my intuition class. Besides Raven's amazing pastry talents, her spiritual gift as an alluromancer was what had customers coming back. Messages and answers came to her in the form of her baking. The dough formed itself into shapes unbeknownst to her, while little messages for incoming customers stuck in the back of her head. Those customers always picked out the perfect pastry for them. Sometimes she could read like a medium, only the spirit wasn't standing there as most mediums say they are. Faith was a clairaudient spiritualist. She heard things beyond the naked ear. She could hear spirits, guides, and angels, or simply see into the future in some sort of mystical way, which made her an excellent newspaper reporter. These turned out so great. Raven crossed the black and white checkered floor, wiping her hands down her pink Wicked Good apron before she grabbed one of the lime green and pink striped boxes with the Wicked Good logo on the top. "You have to have one right now," she insisted, and opened the box. The chocolate treats, their white cream filling injected in the middle, and the chocolate glaze that spilled over the top, made my mouth water. My eyes grew at the sight, and I picked out the one that appeared to be the biggest. Satisfaction poured out of me with the first bite. Perfection. I never dreamed I'd have a dessert named after me. These are better than ding-dongs. It was hard for me to even say those words, seeing ding-dongs were my favorite go-to snack, especially when I had a stressful day. "That's why I named them after you." Raven winked. She jerked her head toward the window like something had caught her attention. I turned to look. "Was that Mr. Prince Charming?" I asked when the hint of a white tail zoomed by the display window. "I think so." She drummed her fingers, her brows furrowed, as though she was going to say something, but the kitchen timer sounded and she hurried off. "I've got to get my day started," she called from over her shoulder. "Watch out for birds today." "Birds?" I questioned and shrugged, heading back out the door with my box of June's gems in my hand. "Cuckoo, cuckoo." Madame Torres couldn't resist. Chapter 2. "It's gonna be a fine one." Constance Karima sidled up to me when I stepped out of the bakery. "Fine one," Patience, Constance's twin sister, repeated, and settled in on the other side of me. "What's in the box?" "Happy morning, sisters." I smiled and held the pastries close. "These are treats for my customers." "Customers?" Constance's green eyes snapped at me. She leaned over and eyed Patience. "Did you hear that, sister? Customers." Patience gave a hard nod. The swoosh of their house dresses rubbed up against their legs as they tried to keep up to my pace. When I stopped in front of the Gathering Grove tea shop, they nearly fell off their feet. "We have a customer." Constance let out a nervous laugh and dug at the ends of her short gray hair. Dead one." Patience dug at her short hair like her sister. "Oh?" If they were trying to get my attention, it worked. "Now you're interested," both said together. I did smell something funny in the air this morning. I looked between them and used my free hand to gather the cloak around my neck when I felt an early morning chill crawl along my spine, giving me a few goosebumps. I'd not heard you had a client. The Karima sisters were ghost whisperers, and owning 2 sisters and a funeral was a perfect cover-up for the real clients they helped in the spiritual world. "We have a new spiritual client." Constance put her hand on Patience when Patience was about to repeat her. Patience always did repeat most of what Constance said. "I think she came in with a tourist, and I need you to find out who it is." Just then, a bus full of tourists rolled down the street. They had their faces plastered to the windows. "How exactly am I supposed to do that?" I asked and looked down at my watch. It was still a little early for a busload of visitors, but that was okay. Eloise had smudged and cleansed Whispering Falls, so we were ready for anything. I've never been involved with ghosts or seeing them. I'm definitely not sure how to find someone among the living they were trying to connect to. Instead of looking at the sisters, I watched the tourists file out one by one, 6 of them, looking like the other. Odd they were. They all wore wide-brimmed hats, multi-pocketed khaki vests, pants that zipped away at the knee, and pairs of ankle-type hiking shoes. They had hiking sticks in their hands and pairs of binoculars hanging from straps around their necks. "I don't know," Constance shrugged. Patience mimicked. "Do whatever heebie-jeebie stuff you do." She fluttered her fingers in the air. "Yeah, heebie-jeebies," Patience mocked. "What if I do this?" My brow rose. "What if I keep my keen senses open, and if I come across someone, I'll let you know." I tapped my temple because they knew I had an innate intuition. Of course, I put any notion the Karima sisters had in the back of my head when the two sisters appeared to be happy with my suggestion because they turned to focus on someone else. "Excuse me." Constance stopped one of the tourists when she passed. "Do you recently have someone who died in your family?" "Yes." Patience took a couple of steps closer to the poor lady, who looked frightened. Patience bent down and stared at the lady's midsection, giving her a good long sniff. "Yes, you." "No?" The woman's eyes grew big as she slowly shook her head back and forth. "I'm sorry." I winked at the woman, hoping she'd believe the Karima sisters had lost their minds. "My friends are a little odd." "Cuckoo, cuckoo, chirp, chirp." Madame Torres made it sound like a bird was in my bag. I pinched a smile and jerked my bag close to me, fighting off Patience as she tried to pry it from me to see what was inside. "I'm so sorry." I apologized again, giving the two sisters a hard look. The woman scurried along with the rest of the group into the Gathering Grove tea shop. "You two have got to stop this," I warned them. "You know we can't go around letting people know our spiritual gifts. Besides, it's a rule." "Where in the rules would that be?" Constance called me out on it. We had many rules to follow. The number one rule was that we couldn't read another spiritualist without their permission. The rule where you don't go around scaring people. I tisked, gave them the wonky eye, and darted across the street. "Keep your intuition open, June," Constance reminded me. She pinched Patience. "Ouch!" Patience winced, rubbing her arm. "No dilly-dallying." Constance gestured them to keep moving. "We've got business to take care of." I shook my head at the sisters and then headed into the Gathering Grove to get the tea I served with the June's gems at a charming cure. "I'm so sorry about the sisters." I practically knocked into the woman they'd scared half to death. "They're harmless, and unless you're using them for your funeral, I'm sure you're not going to run into them again." "I hope not, then." The lady smiled and stuck her hand out. "I'm Paris Rush. I'm here with the Audubon Birdwatching Society." That explains all the gear. Out of the corner of my eye, I could see Gerald briskly waving his hands over his head to get my attention. "Are you here for a specific species?" I knew Whispering Falls had many special creatures, but most were unseen to the mortal eye. "We are here to look for a bird." She shrugged. "Not just any bird," another one of her friends chirped up. Both were dressed alike. "Lucia Bob." I couldn't see the top of her head because her hat covered it, but the ends of her hair were dyed a bright purple. "June Heel." I shook her hand and smiled. "Love the hair." "It's in honor of the rare bird we are here to capture on film." She patted her vest with excitement and hurried off to put in her coffee order. "You'd think she was the new member of the group." Paris rolled her eyes. I tried to tell everyone not to get too excited about the supposed sighting of the rare bird because they aren't known to be in the United States, much less Kentucky. Her brow rose. "June, I'm swamped and don't have the tea ready." Gerald must have gotten sick of trying to grab my attention, so he ran over. "When Petunia gets here, I'll bring it over." "No problem," I told him. I turned back to Paris. "If you have time to stop by a charming cure before you leave town, come see me. I'd love to know if you found the bird." "Wish us luck." Paris smiled. I looked around quickly to see if Mr. Prince Charming had come in to get a few treats from the customers. When I didn't see him, I headed out the door. Chapter 3. I stood on the sidewalk in front of a charming cure and smiled at the small sign that hung in front of the charming small cottage shop. 2 little windows were covered in moss, and the rest of the outside was covered in the most beautiful wisteria vine. The purple and white flowers grew up and around the front door. Darla had planted these flowers, and they had lived on for years after we'd left Whispering Falls, and now years after her death. Every shop in Whispering Falls was a small cottage with a gate and a very distinctive door. I opened the front gate and headed up the steps to get the shop ready for all of those tourists. I put my skeleton key into the door. La 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 la. The faint song blew into the early morning breeze. Good morning, I called over to the 2 large window boxes filled with drowsy daisies, moonflowers, and a couple of singing nettles. Only in the spiritual world could one hear the beautiful sounds of the singing nettles. Their tunes always put a smile on my face. I twisted the key and opened the door, running my hand along the inside of the shop to flip on the lights. A charming cure's floor was filled with display tables draped with red cloth, and all the tables bore different shapes, sizes, and colors of bottles. Each table's bottles were assigned to a genre of alignments. One was for feet and all the things you might buy to help with sore feet. Another was for your hands or arthritis. A table of digestive products was very popular. The home spa kits were also big sellers. The little extra oomph I added to the bottles really made the customers come back for more. That was why my products were carried in the national chain Head to Toe Works across the country, as well as a few stores in the neighboring town of Locust Grove, where Oscar and I had grown up across the street from each other. The tables also held tiered dishes where all the homeopathic soaps were placed in a very cute display. I opened the box of June's gems and organized them on a plate that sat on a round table next to a small cauldron that would soon be filled with hot tea from the Gathering Grove tea shop. It was my little way of making customers eat a special treat while they took their time and looked around the shop. Offering snacks also bought me time to feel out each customer to see exactly what was wrong with them. As I walked past each display, I ran my hand along each tablecloth and any wrinkles that needed to be pulled out. The small details made the shop sparkle with the special touch. My crossbody bag glowed. I took it off my shoulder and hung it on the back of the chair behind the counter so I could take my cloak off and hang it on the coat rack. I reached into my bag and took out the crystal ball. Madame Torres was illuminated with all yellow, red, orange, and purple lines. The lines parted, and her face appeared. Are you trying to tell me something? I blew my blunt bangs out of my eyes and walked around the partition where my cauldron was located. I ran my hand along the black bowl and turned on the switch. In only a few seconds, the bowl became warm and ready for the day ahead. When I walked back to the counter, Madame Torres's eyes were gaunt. Her lips were rosy red, and her skin was pale. Chirp, chirp, Madame Torres sang. Why can't you be like most crystal balls and tell me what you want me to know, instead of beating around the bush? I asked her, and ran my finger along the ingredient shelf behind the counter, stopping at the star anise powder. Strange. I made a mental note about how this particular powder was used to stop misfortune. I'd used this powder only once in my life, and it wasn't a very good memory. Maybe it would be different this time, but the ping in my gut told me something was lurking. I glanced around the shop and wondered exactly where my fairy godcat had gone. Ahem. Madame Torres cleared her throat before she started to chirp again. It's much easier if you tell me what you have to say. I tapped her glass globe on the way back to the cauldron. As soon as the star anise powder hit the inside of the cauldron, it bubbled into a murky, thin, rose-colored fluid. I waited to get the aroma and looked deep into the cauldron when I didn't smell anything. The smell connected the intended customer to the final potion. This told me who to look for when the customer entered the shop. Only this time, lightning strikes and bolts swirled into the mixture. Very odd, I noted, and shrugged as I made my way back around to the counter. There I grabbed the Magical Cures book, the leather-worn journal written by Darla, my mom. I glanced up at the framed photo of her and my father on their wedding day. It was the only photo I had of them. My eyes glanced at the framed photo next to theirs. This one was a photo of Oscar and me on our wedding day. I couldn't help but smile as I ran my hand over the leather-bound book that Darla had left me. It was filled with potions and her journaling, making me feel somewhat connected to her. It took me a few years to realize this was her way of teaching me after she'd been taken from this world way too early. The book also taught me how smart she was, even though she was a mortal married to my spiritualist father. Star anise, I repeated to myself as I thumbed through the book of cures to see what was in there and how exactly someone would use it. The book had a mind of its own and flipped to the third eye page. I smiled and felt my bracelet where I'd received a very special third eye charm. Binoculars? I looked at the hand-drawn images Darla had doodled on the side of the page. Campfire? I questioned. The click of the cauldron shutting off was its way of telling me the potion was perfectly concocted and ready to be placed in its own special bottle. The sound took my attention away from the magical cures book. I heard a light rap at the shop door and looked up to see who was there. The sun was already filtering through the display window in the front of the shop, illuminating all the small, round display tables full of my homeopathic cures. When I noticed Petunia Shrubwood waving at me, I put the book back under the counter and then headed through the shop to let her in. It was going to be a beautiful summer day. I opened the door and greeted her as a nice breeze curled around my ankles. "Good morning," she greeted me. Mr. Prince Charming ran in the shop right before we shut the door on him. He stopped at my ankles and began to do figure eights around them. "There you are." I bent down to rub on him. "I've been looking for you." He let me rub my hand along his back until he trotted off. The carefree feline jumped up on the counter next to Madame Torres and curled his long white tail over her glass ball. "Hat-choo!" Madame Torres's nose turned beet red. "That's it. I'm allergic to cats, and you need to get rid of him now." Her red Medusa hair flowed beyond the boundaries of the glass ball. It was no secret my fairy godcat and my crystal ball didn't get along, but I needed them both, and she wasn't allergic to cats. "Meow, meow." Mr. Prince Charming smacked her with his paw and then jumped off the counter and darted underneath one of the tables, nearly taking the red tablecloth and all the potion bottles with him. Will these two ever get along? I rolled my eyes and walked over to the wall, where I dragged my finger down the line of empty bottles to find the perfect home for the star anise powder potion. Apparently he came in this morning when I opened. I found him sitting in the tree. Petunia's brown hair was pulled up in an overflowing, messy bun. Flowers were stuck in the mess of locks. She had a leash dangling from her wrist, but no dog on the other end. Petunia owned Glory Bee Pet Store and had the spiritual gift of animal reading, so it was very natural Mr. Prince Charming would want to be around her. I told him to come on while we went for our walk, so I could just drop him by. "And your tea." She had a bottle of tea from the Gathering Grove tea shop. "Thank you. That was so kind." I had really good friends here, and I loved our small village. "Can you pour the tea into the cauldron on the table next to the June's gems?" I asked her, since she was still near the front of the shop. "I'm trying to figure out how my gift is going to help someone that's having misfortune." Yes, gifts was how we referred to our little magical village. All the shop owners had a talent, and their shops were their cover-ups. It wasn't like we could tell the world that our little town was magical and filled with potions, wizards, talking snow globes, grinning cats, and singing flowers. We'd all be burned at the stake. Owning a charming cure allowed me to create magical potions that customers had no idea they needed. It was my way of helping the world one person at a time. Today, Petunia was taking a spirit dog on a much-needed walk, so I couldn't see anything attached to her leash. She could, but I couldn't. "Where's baby Oren?" I asked about her toddler, who really wasn't a baby, but he was a baby to all of us in Whispering Falls. My hand continued to go down the shelf of glass bottles. The lime-green hourglass one glowed when my finger touched it, so I knew this bottle was meant for the potion in the cauldron. I couldn't explain how these things worked. It was just the way it was. "I just left him at the tea shop with Gerald." She picked up one of the lavender soaps and lifted it to her nose. A bird popped out of her hair and sang a few chirps. "Yes, I like it too," Petunia said to the bird. I smiled and watched her have a little conversation as the two looked at the soap. I had no idea what they were saying, but Madame Torres lit up and began to chirp. The bird flew from Petunia's messy updo, flying around the shop until it finally landed on top of Madame Torres. My, your crystal ball must be saying something to my little friend." Petunia hurried over to the counter. I followed closely behind her, grabbing the magical cures book on my way. "What are they saying?" "I have no idea." I looked behind my shoulder at them as I walked back behind the partition. There I could finish the potion before I had to open the shop for the day. She's been making bird noises all morning. I plucked the cork lid off the bottle and held it over the cauldron. The liquid poured up and into the bottle like a streamline fountain. I placed the cork in and set it next to the magical cures book. Darla had left me with all the combinations of homeopathic cures, only mine had magic and hers didn't. Your shop is fully stocked and ready to go for today. Petunia continued to walk around. I have to get everything ready for Faith Mortimer. She's going to work for me today while I head back to Hidden Hall to clean out my classroom for the summer break. I noticed the time on the wall clock that was located above my parents' wedding photo. It's almost time to open. I reached over the counter and grabbed the feather duster, walking around the shop and knocking off any dust the sunlight was making visible. I took a lot of time and effort into making the shop cute and inviting. I noticed a few customers were already lined up on the steps when I swiped the duster around the door. A few minutes early won't hurt. I shrugged at Petunia and flipped the sign to open. Good morning, I greeted them after I opened the door. Welcome to a charming cure. I held the door for them. Let me know if you need any assistance. There were 5 customers in all. They had to have come from the tourist bus because they were all dressed in the same gear. I'm here. I felt a slight pushback on the door when I tried to close it. I'm sorry I'm late. Faith Mortimer pushed through the door when I took a step back and let go of the handle. She smiled and pulled her long blonde hair around one shoulder. Her onyx eyes glistened. Faith was a delight. She was young and full of energy. She was one of those women who could pick up on anything very fast, so I felt comfortable with her running my shop for a few hours. I twirled around on the soles of my laced-up black boots, nearly knocking down a customer. I'm so sorry, I apologized. You have to have one. They're delicious. Faith had grabbed the plate of June's gems and shoved it in the customer's face. The Karima sisters asked you strange questions, and now I tried to knock you down. I apologized when I noticed it was Paris. It's fine. Just an unfortunate misfortune. She turned, and my gut clenched. Misfortune? I sidled up to her. She smiled. I say that about everything when something doesn't go right. In that moment, I knew the star anise powder potion was for her. I'll be right back. I put up a finger and hurried back to the counter to grab the specialty. I'm Paris Rush. I heard her introduce herself to Petunia and Faith. I'm Petunia Shrubwood, and this is Faith Mortimer. Welcome to our village. They nodded at Paris. I'm sure you'll find a lot of neat creatures in our woods, Faith said. Audubon? Petunia's hot pink A-line skirt swayed with each step she took in her pointy-toed black laced-up boots, focusing on the tourist, interrupting us. Yes, we are a chapter in the Global National Audubon Society. We protect birds and the places they need, today and tomorrow, throughout the Americas, using science, advocacy, education, and on-the-ground conservation. Paris sounded like she was reading off a brochure or something. We believe there is a rare bird in your area. We're here for a few days. We all have a section of the woods to comb through to look for the bird, for a recording, and get it into the rare bird database. Wow! Mr. Prince Charming's mouth opened in a growl as his body curled up, making a huge hump in his spine. His hair stood on end. The bird flew off Madame Torres. Mr. Prince Charming pounced into the air to try to catch the bird. Spangled Smoky Momoko! Paris screamed, frantically feeling around for something in the fanny pack she was wearing. Spangled what? Petunia's mouth fell open as she watched the bird glide past her hair and out the door when another customer came in. That's the bird! Paris pushed past everyone and darted outside. Wait, you forgot your lotion, I hollered after her, dangling the bottle from my fingers. It was too late. She was gone. Wow! Mr. Prince Charming batted at the air, dropping something from his mouth. Petunia and I looked at each other with big eyes when we both noticed he'd dropped a bird charm on the ground. Chapter 4. A flurry of activity arose among Faith, Petunia, and me, and no one would notice but us 3. Petunia had darted out the door after the bird, right behind Paris. Faith pushed me out the door, knowing full well I had to go see Bellatrix Van Loo, Bella for short, from Bella's Baubles. Carefully, I traipsed down the steps of a charming cure and took a left on the crowded sidewalk, weaving my way between the tourists so as not to run into them. Bella's Baubles was the first shop when you drove into Whispering Falls, which meant that it was located farthest from my shop. The faster my feet carried me, the tighter I gripped the charm. "Yoo-hoo!" Isadora Solstice hollered from across the street when I passed. "June!" I simply held the charm up over my head. "A charm?" Arabella Paxton, owner of Magical Moments, stood outside her shop with a watering can. "Oh dear," she quipped when I held the charm her way. The gorgeous flowers in the pot didn't get their morning drink of water, but Arabella's feet did, as she stood there in shock when her eyes fixed on the bird charm. I'd love to say that I loved getting little charms from my fairy godcat, but the truth of the matter was that every time he gave me a charm, it meant that I needed protection, or someone I loved needed protection. It wasn't necessarily a great thing. I'd already received over 12 charms from him, and I collected those on the charm bracelet that I wore as a reminder that no matter how great things were going, evil was always lurking around. "Let's go." Izzy had already made it across the street and wrapped her hand around Arabella's elbow bend. "Thank you," I said to my friends. The sound of our black, pointy, laced-up boots and the swoosh of our A-line skirts was enough for the tourists to part and give us a straight shot to Bella's Baubles. "I'm telling you, I saw a spangled smoky momoko." The excited voice caught my attention. It was Paris. "It was in that shop down there, and it flew out." I stopped in front of Bella's Baubles, the quaint cream cottage with a pink wood door adorned with different colored jewels, and looked across the street where Paris was talking to a group from her Audubon club. All the club members faced the direction where she was pointing, which just so happened to be Glorybee, Petunia's pet store. "Her!" Paris's finger dragged across the street and pointed at me. "She saw it. She's the store owner." The excitement from the crowd caused them to run across the street and throw a mob of questions at me. "How did the bird get into your shop? How many times have you seen the spangled smoky momoko? Can you describe the bird? What colors was the spangled smoky momoko? What is your name?" "She doesn't know." "We have no comment on any sort of spangled smoky momoko." Izzy grabbed me with her other hand and dragged me and Arabella through the gate of Bella's Baubles, marching us up to the jeweled door. Then we entered the shop. I was expecting June. Bella's round cheeks balled up through her grin, exposing the small gap between her two front teeth. Her long blonde hair framed her face and cascaded down her small frame. Her smoky eyes twinkled with laughter. "But what do I owe the pleasure of Bella and Izzy?" she asked, and drummed her fingertips on the glass counter where all her fine gemstones were displayed for her customers. "It appears this new charm is going to be sparking a lot of interest." I uncurled my fist and dropped the charm on the counter. Before I could bring my hand back, Bella had quickly unclasped my charm bracelet and held it up. "Freedom and strength, as well as harmony with fellow creatures." Bella's words fell from her mouth as her eyes took on a trance-like state. "Only it feels much more than that." Bella tisked as though I should know better. "June, haven't you been listening to your crystal ball? Your fairy godcat?" "Oh, June," Izzy gasped. "Even I know when to listen to my flowers." Arabella gave a smug look. Her long hair flowed down the back of her black tee, which she paired with a pink crinoline knee-length skirt. She was a flower spiritualist. When a customer of hers picked a flower, she could tell a lot about them, even their future. "I think this has something to do with Petunia." Bella picked up the charm and dangled it in the air. Her spiritual talent was astrology, and she could read the stars and gems. "I feel there's a certain spirit that needs to come forward in the form of this." She twisted her hand in the air. "Spangled..." She fought to find the name. "Spangled Smoky Momoko," I said, because the name would be forever tattooed in my memory. "Yes, that dear." Her eyes drifted over our shoulders when her door opened. "Sisters?" The Karima sister stood in the doorway. "The ghost said you found the spangled smoky momoko." Constance Karima waddled up to the counter. Her eyes focused on the bird charm. "And I see Mr. Prince Charming has struck again." "Struck again," Patience repeated, and bounced on her feet with delight. "Yes, again." Her thick fingers reached out to touch the charm. Bella scolded her as she wagged her finger. "This is for June." "Are you saying I'm in trouble?" I asked, always cautious when Bella said things like this. "You, my dear, have been chosen to figure out exactly why the spangled—" Bella fought for the name. "Spangled Smoky Momoko," I helped her out. "Yes, that." Her cheeks balled, her eyes focused on me. "You must find out why this bird has descended upon our village before the crow flies at midnight," she said in a very mysterious voice. Immediately, she grabbed the charm and put it on a jump ring. She took my bracelet and found the perfect spot for the new bird charm. "Crow?" Constance drew back. "Oh, sister." Patience's words drew out in a fearful tone. "The crow." "The ghost said that same thing about the crow flying." A sheer, fearful look crossed Constance's face. "I've got me a ghost that's gotta go." The sisters hurried out of the shop, leaving a trail of cold air where they stood. The hairs on my arms stood above the goosebumps. "What about the bird? It's not a crow," I gulped, turning back to Bella. "Madame Taurus has been doing this cuckoo sound all morning." She walked along the back of the counter toward me, holding the bracelet taut. My hand shook when I held out my arm for her to clasp it on my wrist. A flicker of fear permeated my intuition. Something was very wrong. Whether or not the Spangled Smoky Momoko had to do with Paris, I did know one thing. The ghost, the Karima sisters' ghost, had everything to do with this rare bird. But how? "You must rely on your guides to help you." Izzy's lashes swept up, leaving a shadow deep in her eyes. "This is for you, June. We need you." Arabella didn't make me feel any better. "All the guides are saying it's you who has to help us." I ran my hand over my bracelet. It was warm to the touch. Panic rioted within me, and I knew I would need all of these protection charms if I was going to get down to the bottom of the ghost. Chapter 5. It appears to be some sort of bird thing, I told Oscar over the phone on my way back up the hill toward our cottage, where I had to track through the woods to get to Hidden Hall, a spiritualist university. "I'm not exactly sure what's going on, but the guides are restless, and the Audubon Society is pretty determined to figure out where this bird has gone." "You said this bird, the Spangled Smoky Momoko, was with Petunia this morning?" he asked, as if he were in investigation mode. "Yes." I looked down when I felt Mr. Prince Charming brush up against my skirt and dart up the hill ahead of me. "I really can't do anything right now since I've got to go clean out my classroom for the summer break." "What time will you be finished?" he asked. "Around noon. Faith is watching the shop for me." After I'd left Bella's baubles, I hurried back to a charming cure to check on Faith and grab my teacher's suitcase so I could carry back all my potions from the classroom and store them at the shop for the summer. I hurried past the cottage and smiled when I saw the green machine parked in the driveway. I didn't drive the old El Camino much anymore, but every time I looked at it, a warm, fuzzy feeling came over me from the fond memories. Warm and fuzzy was better than cold and scared, which was how I'd felt this morning after Mr. Prince Charming had dropped the bird charm at my feet. I heard an odd silence on Oscar's end of the phone. "Before the crow flies at midnight, huh?" He broke the dead air. "Yes." I realized he'd not listened to a word I said about Faith working at the shop for me and how I'd be finished by noon. "You're going to look into this, aren't you?" "Do you know exactly what that phrase means, June?" he asked in an emotionless voice that chilled me to the bone. "It means there's going to be a secret meeting. I think you need to call a smudge and let all the spiritualists know what is going on so they can keep their eye out for any sort of meeting." "Oscar, you're scaring me," I told him. A long, brittle silence followed. The fog hung just above the tree line as we entered the forest behind my cottage. With Mr. Prince Charming leading the way, I knew we were on the right track to Hidden Hall, a spiritualist university. We passed the big rock where all the smudging ceremonies in the village took place, a rock I knew very well since I was the master of ceremonies with my homeopathic skills. As a community, we celebrated everything around the rock. Maybe Oscar was right. I needed to call a smudge. "You had a nightmare last night." His words stopped me in my tracks, and I turned around, looking back over Whispering Falls through a small clearing. My heart swelled. I had never really felt at home until I moved here, and I couldn't imagine it coming under attack from whatever was looming. I didn't wake up, I told him when I tried to recall what the nightmare was about. It had been a long time since I'd had a nightmare, something I thought was long gone. What happened? A pulsing feeling within me demanded more. "You were making bird calls," he said, causing me to breathe in shallow, quick gasps. "You didn't wake up, and you weren't fighting it like you usually do, so I let you ride it out." I don't remember. It was very odd for me not to remember the nightmares. If I can't recall, maybe I wasn't learning something. "June, you and I both know when you have a nightmare, it's a way of giving you clues to something evil lurking." He was right, only I wasn't ready to admit it. Izzy and Arabella told me it was my job to figure this crow thing out. I was hoping they were wrong. When I came to the wheat field, I parted the tall wheat. Some of the stalks vibrated in a wave motion. I knew it was Mr. Prince Charming making his way to the middle of the field, where the sign with several long wooden arms, each with a finger pointing in a different direction, was the gate to the university. It was a secret passage, and only the spiritualists knew where it was, in case a mortal might find it. I set my suitcase down next to me. I'd brought it to bring back some ingredients and the extra potions I'd made over the school year with my students. Meow, meow. Mr. Prince Charming jumped up on his hind legs and swatted the sign. "Listen, I'm going to look into some things while you're gone. You call me as soon as you get finished cleaning your classroom." Oscar wasted no time. "I love you, and be careful." "I love you too." I took a step back when the sign's wooden arms glowed with the names of schools. Eye of Newt Crystal Ball School, Tickle Palm School, Intuition School. Intuition School. I tapped the arrow on the sign that led to Intuition School. Like magic, a pathway appeared across the wheat field. My eyes followed as the path gained momentum and ended at a small yellow cottage that had boxes under each window overflowing with geraniums, morning glories, petunias, moonflowers, and trailing ivy, leaving a rainbow of colorful explosion. The awning, flapping in the light breeze, read Intuition School in lime green calligraphy. I couldn't help but smile when it came into view. Even with all the uneasiness going on behind me, I knew ahead of me was a group of young women and men who were eager to learn, and it felt good that I had a hand in shaping the future spiritualists. "Let's go." I picked up the suitcase and walked along the path. "June!" the familiar voice called behind me. Swiftly I turned, my A-line skirt making a swishing noise. "Chandra!" I put the suitcase down and held out my arms to greet my dear friend and palm reader, Chandra Shango. She owned Cleansing Spirit Spa, a wonderful cover for her true gift. "Don't you look great?" I grasped her hands and held them out to the side to get a good look at her. She had short raspberry hair partially covered by a golden turban, with a blue jewel situated between her brows. The blue cloak she'd chosen to wear was printed all over with a constellation in the same shade of gold as her turban. "Your nails!" I brought her hands up to my face and took a good look at her nails, painted with gold moon and stars. "I wanted to talk to you, so I thought I'd keep you company while you cleaned out your classroom." Chandra gave me a steady gaze, "especially since I heard what happened this morning with that bird." I let go of her hands and bent down to pick up the suitcase. "What did you hear?" I asked her. "I heard how the woman in your shop went nuts about Petunia's bird." Chandra was a tad bit, well, a whole lot nosy. "I can't believe how she followed Petunia into Glorybee and threatened her." "What?" I almost stumbled over my own feet when I heard what Chandra had said. She threatened Petunia? "Petunia called Oscar at the station. Didn't he tell you?" Her eyes held a glint of wonder. "He didn't mention it." My mouth went dry. "He asked me about the crow and all that business about midnight." Chandra stopped dead in her tracks and brought her hand up to her chest. "Before the crow flies at midnight?" she asked, and fluttered off in a ball of anxiety as she waved her hand. "That's not good, June." She moved faster and faster, flailing her arms to the side. "We have to call a smudge, and we have to cleanse the Treesort." "The Treesort?" I questioned her reference to the only bed and breakfast in the village. She stopped right in front of the cottage and turned around to face me. I watched her eyes widen with concern. "Yes, I had a vision when a customer came in. She gulped and held her hands out, palm side up. When the crow flies at midnight, she will die. Who will die? I asked. The customer. She clamped her jaw tight and stared. Chapter 6. Ah, here you are. My Aunt Helena stood in the classroom, an armful of different ingredients in a basket dangling from the crook of her elbow. She'd been walking around to the large 3-person tables to collect anything left over from the school year. I wasn't sure if you were coming to clean out your classroom due to the issues going on in Whispering Falls. Issues? I sat my suitcase down and took the basket from her, finishing up the job she'd already started. Chandra? Aunt Helena was dressed in her usual head-to-toe black underneath her black cape that hung past her knees. She nodded at Chandra before she swept a hand in front of her, pointing the polished red nail on her finger at Mr. Prince Charming before he had a chance to growl at her. You make any problems here, I'll banish you from ever coming with June. Mr. Prince Charming gave her a look before he jumped up on the teacher's desk at the front of the room and watched her every move. The two of them had a history, and I never truly understood it, but there was a mutual love of me between them which forced them to get along. Please, make yourself at home, she told Chandra. Issues? I asked Aunt Helena again. You mean you're going to make me tell you how I know Mr. Prince Charming brought you a bird charm, and how Chandra can see there's an imminent death lurking? The way I see it, I set the full basket on the desk, picked up my suitcase and opened it, and began to place the leftover ingredients in it as I continued. I can head back to Whispering Falls after this and do a nice smudge, not to mention stay up late at night to keep an eye out for any crows. I'm not sure if that's a solid plan, but it's a start. Aunt Helena drummed her fingers together, making clicking noises with her long nails. Well, what is your gut telling you about the ghost? She swept her long red hair over her shoulder and picked at the ends. It's interesting because the Karima sisters can't tell me anything about the ghost. It appears to be following them around with no purpose but bugging them. With all the potions and ingredients safely in the suitcase, I retrieved the cauldron cleaner from underneath the desk. That's where I see the death. I'm not sure, but I feel as though the ghost isn't fully a ghost, but on the verge. Chandra told her tale while I sprayed the cleaner in the students' cauldrons and wiped them clean. The students had already cleaned them after their last class, but you never knew who was coming to take a summer session or even if they cleaned them thoroughly. It was never a good thing to mix any sort of potions with another intended potion. I was in the gathering grove this morning, and I couldn't help but shake one of the bird watcher's hand when I noticed an eerie feeling. Chandra's tone became chilly, so much so that she did a shimmy that started at her shoulders and waved down her body, finishing at her toes. The only other time I get a chill with an eerie feeling is death, but, she held up a finger, it wasn't the bird watcher's death. Her words were riddles that I couldn't understand. That's why I believe if I do a smudge and keep vigilant for a crow at midnight, we might be able to stop it. My words made Aunt Helena and Chandra draw back. Think about it. We've never had time to save a life after we've predicted danger. Maybe that's why the ghost is here. I got the charm, plus the saying about how the crow and midnight means there's going to be a secret meeting. I twirled my finger around the three of us. We are all gifted enough to keep an eye out for any sort of meeting. I smacked my hands together, causing them to jump. Aunt Helena. I ran over to her and grabbed her by the arms. Can you clean up the rest for me? I think if I can hurry back to Whispering Falls, I can get Faith to put something in the paper for all of us to be watchful for such a meeting. Brilliant, Aunt Helena gasped, flinging her arm out from under her cape, pointing in the direction for us to go. Mr. Prince Charming needed no coaxing to get out of her sight. He'd already run off the porch and disappeared into the wheat field before Chandra and I even got the door of the intuition school shut. Do you mind if I go visit with a few of my old professors? Chandra was a talker, and she loved having friends. She was probably the most popular person in the village. Of course I don't. But, I warned, you'd better be at the smudge meeting on time. I'll keep an ear open for the paper, she said, referring to how Faith delivered the paper, the Whispering Falls Gazette. We weren't going to risk mortals seeing our rituals or anything we did, so we used Faith's gift of clairaudience. She was able to hear things that were inaudible above and beyond our other spiritual abilities. She could hear into the future, and if I could get her on board to keep an ear out and put it in the paper for the rest of the spiritualists, my plan to help save the life Chandra Shango believed to be murdered just might work. Mr. Prince Charming didn't wait for me, and Chandra had stayed back at Hidden Hall, a spiritualist university, to visit the professor she knew, leaving me to make my way back to Whispering Falls alone. The sun was sitting high in the sky, brightly shining over the village. The crispy green color of the trees' full summer leaves added to the pops of yellow, red, and purple marigold baskets Arabella Paxton had hung from the dowel rods of the carriage lights. The vinca vine spilled over the basket and hung down, exposing the various green color tones. The sidewalks were filled with tourists, but none of them appeared to be the birdwatchers from the Audubon Society. A charming cure was filled with customers, and they all smiled as they uncorked the bottles and put them up to their noses. Being in my shop was an experience I cultivated to make everyone feel happy, even if they didn't buy anything. "You're back so soon." Faith was behind the register tallying up a customer. "I wasn't expecting you until supper time." "I'll be right out." I held up the suitcase. "I want to put these in the storage room." I left her out there to finish up with the customer, and I opened the door behind the counter, where there was a small room that I used for extra storage. There was a small couch and refrigerator for those times when I was so busy that I'd need a nap. I'd even stayed there a few times. I put the suitcase on the ground and left it to clean out later while the shop was so busy. "Have you put out the paper today?" I asked, knowing I'd not heard it, when I walked back out of the room. The paper was only heard by spiritualists who subscribed to it, and I did, but I'd been so preoccupied with receiving the charm and getting the classroom cleaned up, I'd not truly been listening. My head was filled with other things. "I've had no time, but if you're worried about the ad you took out, don't be. It's going in today." She brushed her hands together. "Now that you're here, I can do the paper. Actually," I glanced around the shop to make sure there were no prying ears, "I need you to tell all spiritualists to be on the lookout for any secret meetings." I gave her a quick rundown of what had transpired earlier after she showed up at the shop and I ran down to Bella's baubles. "Chandra said that about a ghost?" Faith sucked in a deep breath. Her blue eyes grew big as the sea. "That's so sad to think their soul knows they've died, but they haven't—" Her voice trailed off. "That's why I think if we be very vigilant, maybe we can prevent it." I knew it was a long shot, but it was worth a try. "I also want you to call a special smudge for tonight at dusk." "You got it." Faith gathered her belongings and left me to finish the day at a charming cure. Chapter 7. The day was so long, and the customers had filed in one after the other, making it a great business day. But with other things on my mind, and now that Faith had put the paper out, I was busy coming up with the words and rituals I'd use at the ceremony, so the day seemed to drag on. Mr. Prince Charming was still out and about. I'd yet to see Chandra come back, but I did notice Gerald, Izzy, and Petunia standing outside at dusk, as though they would all go to the smudge ceremony together. Quickly, I locked the shop door so I wouldn't have to hurry any last-minute customers. I pulled back the display window curtains to see if Mr. Prince Charming had been prowling around, but there was no sign of him. This usually meant he was hanging down at Gloryby, where I would see Petunia shortly for the smudge ceremony. I hurried back behind the counter and took in all the smudging sticks hanging down from the bottom of the shelf. They were your typical sage sticks I'd made for the general public. The new trend seemed to be waving the light stick around the house for good juju or something. We spiritualists had specific needs for them, and today the need was to protect ourselves and the tourists within our village limits. I quickly gathered my smudging kit and put it on the counter while I got my cloak on. I eyed the star anise powder potion that was specifically for Paris and threw that into my bag. Then I locked up the shop for the night and headed up the hill where the Gathering Rock was located. I wasn't sure when I would run into Paris, but I had to give it to her. The Gathering Rock was exactly what it sounded like, a big rock with a clearing where everyone stood in a circle. "June." Petunia said my name, put her hand on my forearm, and stopped me just as I entered the circle. I looked down and saw Mr. Prince Charming doing figure eights around her ankles. You and I both know the bird Paris saw was my bird from my shop. It had come to me a couple of weeks ago. It's the oddest bird. I know it's a soul, but I'm not sure of what the soul is about. It's a weird one. I'm worried they will find the bird and destroy it. Petunia bounced up and down on her toes as baby Oren slept in one of those hiking backpacks strapped on her back. Soon he would be packing her. He was getting so big. I don't think the Audubon Society wants to destroy it, but merely take photos of it. I smiled widely. What if we stage an all-night campout in the woods and you have the bird appear? This way they will leave our village after they get their photos. That's an excellent idea, June. Oscar concurred and gave me a quick hello kiss. That way, if the crow flies at midnight, we can see who the meeting is between, if it has to do with the birdwatchers. I don't know. Petunia gnawed on her lip. I've never left Oren alone at night. This is for the good of our community, and you are the village president. If Oscar was pulling the leadership card on our president, I knew he meant business, and felt there was some evil lurking. Fine, I'll tell Gerald, but he's not going to like it. Petunia turned and stalked off with her hands fisted at her side. What do you think that's about? Oscar asked as he watched Petunia storm off. I would like to say it's about Oren, but I think there's more to it than that. I tossed any ideas that might be running through Petunia's head into the back of my mind so we could get the ceremony started. While you do this, I'll head over to the Full Moon Resort and tell the Audubon Society members what we have in store for them. You meet me there afterwards? He asked. Yes, but can you first stop by the shop and grab my Tresort Mr. Sandman bag? I asked him. He readily agreed, sealing the deal with one last kiss before he headed down the hill, and I started laying all the smudging materials on the rock. The gathering rock was its own spiritual entity. I brought the items, but the rock charged them with the right spell needed for the purpose of our meeting. Carefully, I took out the lighter and lit the smudge stick. I let it sit on the rock to be charged and took out the feather from the bag. All the spiritualists from the village gathered around in a circle and held hands. The forest animals gathered at the edge of the trees and dipped their noses before they extended their necks to the sky. Today we come together to perform a purely preventive smudge. The magical barrier is used to ban negative magic effects from our village and tourists held here. I talked while I walked into the middle of the circle. Behind me I held a bottle, sprinkling a thin line of salt. After I made a long line, I used the feather to sweep the salt from side to side. Then I brushed the knife in a horizontal motion 3 times toward the village. The smudge stick began to smoke in long streams, letting me know it was fully charged from the rock. I swept across the salt line, creating a dusty tornado as I got the smudge stick. Slowly I walked in front of my peers, fanning the smoke up their bodies, around their heads, and up through the head chakra to ward off evil. Every few seconds, the winged creatures would fly into our smoke, making it cling to their feathers as they took the evil away into the far-off distance. Everyone chanted, "Trula, Trula, open the gates. Your spiritualists are waiting. Trula, Trula, open the gates. Your spiritualists await. The time has come to send us the bubble of protection for which the midnight crow flies. Trula, Trula, close the gates. Your protection is upon us." As the chant grew louder and louder, the animals made their native calls, and the burnt orange sunset grew a dark red with streaks of heavy gray. A dark cloud with flashes of lightning blanketed the circle of spiritualists. I fanned the smudge stick toward the cloud, allowing it to absorb any and all evil the smoke carried to finalize the ceremony. "And we all raise our hands to lift the evil and cover us in protection," I said, and put the smudge stick on the gathering rock. The smudge stick would stay there until it burned out. Then the rock would absorb it as if it were never there. I made my way back to the circle and broke the chain where Petunia and Chandra, glad to see I'd made it, stood and took their hands in mine. Collectively, we lifted our hands and bowed our chins with our eyes closed. After one clap of thunder, we knew it was over and dropped our grip on one another. Petunia lingered around while I said goodbye to our peers and reminded them to keep an ear out for any sort of private meetings. "I hope this works." Petunia looked at me, and the spangled, smoky Momoko poked his beak out of her messy updo, making Oren giggle. "Not now. It's not safe." Petunia tapped the bird, which disappeared back into her hair. "I'm in fear of my feathered friend." I'm wondering if the bird and the Karima sisters' ghost are connected. I glanced around to make sure no one was listening. We had no need to create any more fear than we already had with the newspaper report and the smudge ceremony. "Here is my plan." Petunia leaned in a little. Oren stuck his hand out to me. When I took it, he smiled. "Un," he giggled, trying to say my name. June. Petunia exaggerated my name for him. "Un," he repeated and giggled. "I'm sorry. He's having a hard time with his J's." She seemed very bothered by it. "J is very hard to phonetically say," I told her. "Besides, I like how he says mine." I leaned over and kissed him on the cheek. "Soon you're going to have to let him walk." "He is a darter. It's made Gerald crazy." Petunia rarely talked about her home life, and I really enjoyed discussing Oren, since one day I knew I'd like to have a child of my own. Not anytime soon. So enjoying Oren as a toddler was a lot of fun. "He's a boy," I said like I knew. "I've heard they're very active." "True." She sucked in a deep breath before letting it exit her nose. "Back to tonight. I'm going to let Spangle go on a perch and let him glow." "Does he really glow?" I asked, never hearing of such a bird. "Yes, there's not been but a few sightings over the past 40 million years." I thought I heard her wrong. "Million?" I corrected her. "Yes, million," she said. I stood corrected. "That's why it's so rare, June. That's what worries me about the soul, and why a soul would want to come back as the spangled. I knew once he flew to me there was going to be trouble, so I've kept him in my hair this whole time." Everything she told me, I stuck in the back of my head in case I needed to come back to it. "I'm telling you that if we allow them to get photos, our village will be swarmed with national attention we do not want." Her tone held a warning. "As the village president, I have to think about what's best. I've called a council meeting." "Do you want me to come?" I asked, even though I was no longer on the town council, which consisted of Izzy, Gerald, Oscar, Chandra, and Petunia. "I think it would make sense because Mr. Prince Charming has the ability to know it involves you." Her words punched me in the gut, making me gulp them back down. "See, how you react tells me we have to proceed with caution. Plus, I want the council to know what Oscar is expecting and what he'd like to accomplish with the campout." "When is the meeting?" I asked. The gray cloud dissipated and gave off the most spectacular star show in the sky. The lightning bugs were so happy as they darted around the woods, showing off their talent. "Right before 10 p.m. at the Full Moon Resort before we head out for the night of camping." She had a deep worry in her eyes. "I hope Gerald is going to be able to take care of Oren and get to work in the morning." "I'm sure he'll be fine." I wanted to make her feel better, but wasn't sure how to do that. "I'm going to hurry home and give him a bath before Faith comes over to babysit while Gerald and I come to the meeting. Hopefully a long bath will get him very sleepy." She sighed and started to walk down the hill. "I'll see you soon," I called out to her. Then I went back to the rock to gather my bag. Madame Torres was glowing deep inside. I opened the bag and pulled her out. "It's about time you got me out of there. You'd think after a bird called and made all sorts of noises, you'd keep me out all the time." The snarky crystal ball's insides rolled like waves, with orange, green, and pink swirls, before they parted and Madame Torres's face took up the whole glass globe. "I'm telling you to grab the ding-dong from the bottom of your bag and eat it. It's going to be a long night." I held the ball up to my face and took a good look at her. Rarely did she ever tell me to eat a ding-dong. Often she'd tell me to get rid of Mr. Prince Charming. I looked deep into her eyes. They were half shut and encircled by purple eyeshadow. Her lips lined with red, she spoke. "You're going to have a long night, and we need the sugar to stay awake." "Does this have anything to do with the crow at midnight?" I asked. "The crow will fly at midnight. It's up to you whether or not you watch for it." Her face waved until she was one with the orange, green, and pink swirls. "Wow!"
Mr. Prince Charming appeared out of nowhere. He stood on his hind legs, batted at the crystal ball in my hands, and then hit the charm bracelet on my wrist. "You think I'm in danger?" I warned my fairy godcat. "If you were to knock her out of my hands, you'd be in more danger than me." Meow, meow. It was like he was tisking me. He darted toward the woods beyond the rock, his long white tail swayed back and forth in the dusk. He wasn't worried. Why was I? I ran my hand along the charm bracelet, hoping it would give me extra protection on what was going to be a long night. Chapter 8. I followed Mr. Prince Charming to the edge of the woods, where we'd cut through to get to the Tresort. Normally I'd go to Gloryby, the last shop in town, next to the trail on which the Full Moon Tresort guests walked to the hotel. We didn't let them drive their cars in the woods for fear of pollution or other dangers to our special habitat. They parked in the parking lot next to Gloryby and where Patch's pumpkin patch was located. Patch wasn't in town for the summer. He really ran his business in the fall and winter when we had a lot of tourists looking for holiday things to do. As a tourist community, we played up all the holidays, especially Halloween. The ghostly holiday was right up our alley. "Stop that," I called out to Mr. Prince Charming as he tried to smack down all the lightning bugs in his way. "They tease you because you get so upset with them." It was true. They loved to swarm around his head and annoy him. Remember, they're teens. It was funny to see how he acted toward the young'uns, making me wonder just how old Mr. Prince Charming was. He showed up on Darla's doorstep on my 10th birthday. It was a day I'd never forget. I had always wanted a cat and a charm bracelet. Darla wouldn't let me have either one. She insisted that cats were dirty and charm bracelets were too expensive. Of course, we were talking about Darla. She never even bought me a birthday cake with my name on it. She'd go to the local grocery store and get cakes that were never picked up and had other people's names on them. Or if she really didn't want me to know, she'd try to scrape the name off and blend in the icing. The manager's special sticker was always a dead giveaway, and she didn't bother peeling it off. It was okay. It was the only time she let me have sugar, and I wasn't going to complain. On that particular birthday, I thought she'd changed her mind and given in when Mr. Prince Charming showed up with a charm tied around his neck. It wasn't until years later that I found out Mr. Prince Charming had been sent by the Order of the Elders and the Whispering Falls Village Council to keep me protected, since I didn't live in the protection of the village. Somehow they had figured out that I did have the spiritual powers of my father and not the mortal side of Darla. Darla knew something was up because she let me keep him and the charm. We'd been best friends since. He was a little overprotective, as he didn't like me listening to Madame Torres, and he certainly didn't welcome Oscar Park, though he didn't mind it when Oscar tapped on my bedroom window. We'd sneak out of my window and run across the street to Oscar's house, where he'd stashed boxes of ding-dongs. We'd devour every single one. Whereas Darla never let me eat sweets, Oscar's uncle, who was raising him at the time, didn't care what Oscar ate. Those were fond memories of a much simpler time when Oscar and I had no idea we were spiritualists or that we were destined not only to leave Locust Grove, but also be married. However, I couldn't say I wasn't smitten with him from the first time I'd seen him. Today was no different. After Mr. Prince Charming and I made it through the woods and entered the open area where the Full Moon Tresort was located, I saw Oscar Park standing on the bed and breakfast deck, looking over at the tree line at us. He still took my breath away. His blue eyes focused on me, and they glistened when his smile reached them. His beautiful white teeth glowed in the darkness. He wore a white t-shirt tucked into his jeans and a black belt. His black hair was kept nice and tight to his head as always. He had thick black brows and high cheekbones that would have made him a model if he'd chosen that career path. He stared at me intently as a vaguely sensuous light passed between us. "Wow!" Mr. Prince Charming growled his dislike and darted up the steps of the Full Moon Tresort. Full Moon was unlike any bed and breakfast or resort. It was a fully run 5-star accommodation, only the rooms were all located in different trees. Maybe seeing Oscar walking down the steps of the Tresort really had my heart going pitter-patter because we were married on these very steps. "Hey," he greeted me in his southern drawl as he wrapped me up in his arms. I really wanted to hug you at the ceremony, but I figured we had to be all business. I curled up on my toes and kissed him. Marrying Oscar was a dream come true, and I still felt like I was in a dream state when I was around him. Here's your Mr. Sandman. He pulled a small black velvet drawstring pouch from the front pocket of his jeans. Are you going to go now? He asked about my business deal with Amethyst Plum, the owner of Full Moon Resort, Whispering Falls' first bed and breakfast. Of course, it was a cover-up for her spiritual gift of oneirocriticy, which was interpreting dreams. Since I made homeopathic cures, she hired me to create an amazing sleep experience for the bed and breakfast guest, which meant a good night's sleep. There was nothing better for that than my Mr. Sandman sprinkles. I'll head on up to the rooms and be back in time for the village council meeting. I took the velvet bag and curled it in my grip. Let me know if you need help. He lifted his t-shirt and exposed his wand, making me lose my breath for a second. You sure do know how to make my heart skip. I winked and gave him another kiss before I darted back off into the woods, where the first guest house in the bed and breakfast was located on top of a big oak. It was the most spectacular treehouse, and when guests saw it, they fell in love with the round structure. Mr. Prince Charming met me on the path to the treehouse. I looked up at the tiny white lights dangling along the tree branches, lighting our way. Pops of colorful flowers dotted the path. The farther in the woods we walked, the singing nettles' hum grew louder and louder, pleasing to my ears. Hello, my dears. I bent down and parted the ferns, where the singing nettles were hidden. They had to stay hidden because their magical powers threw off any mortal. I smiled as they hummed one of Darla's favorite tunes. You are my sunshine, my only sunshine. I sang along with them. Mr. Prince Charming dragged his long white tail along my back before he darted up the steps of the round treehouse, reminding me we had limited time. Today I must hurry off, I told the singing nettles, but I promise I will be back soon. I gave each one of them a loving tap on its stem. Once I was up in the treehouse, I couldn't help myself from taking in the breathtaking views of Whispering Falls. This was the best treehouse Full Moon Resort offered, in my opinion. The little house was decorated very romantically, a large fluffy couch and chairs along with fancy French chic furniture. The bedroom was just as fancy, with the off-white decor and the four-poster king bed draped in sheer curtains and dangling lights. You get off there. I snapped my finger at Mr. Prince Charming to get him off the guest pillow. I walked over, ran my hand over the pillow to smooth it back out, and decided to start the Mr. Sandman sprinkles there. I took the small velvet pouch off from around my wrist and carefully opened the pouch. The spell didn't require a lot of the potion sprinkles. Last winter we had a couple honeymooning from Honey Springs, Kentucky. The newlywed husband had gotten a little too much Mr. Sandman sprinkles and didn't wake up for days. Could you imagine what his new bride thought? Since then, I'd been very careful on how much went into each guest room. There was nothing better than a great night's sleep in a treehouse. The fond memories made Amethyst's customers keep coming back. I took a pinch from the pouch and rubbed my fingers together, walking around the room so the glittery dust fell as the spell glistened all over the room. It was the perfect amount, and I knew this guest was going to feel well rested in the morning. Meow, meow. Mr. Prince Charming made sure I didn't dilly-dally since we were short on time. With my fairy godcat on my case, I took no time to get in and out of the guest tree houses, leaving a dabble of the Mr. Sandman sprinkles behind. Laughter spilled out of the main building. The full moon hung over the treesort. It was a guaranteed sight. Amethyst made sure every tree house and the main building had a full moon every night. That was hard to explain to guests, but with magic, you can make mortals think anything. I grinned when I saw Amethyst pass by the big window in the massive structure nestled deep in the forest. She wore a black pair of pants and a black buttoned blouse. Her black hair lay in loose curls down her back, and her thick black brows arched perfectly over her dark eyes. Her long lashes swooped down with each blink and smile she gave her guests as they took something she'd cooked. She was beautiful. Her only pop of color was the tips of her red heels, which she always wore. I followed Mr. Prince Charming up the double-decker set of steps into the A-frame wooden structure, seeing nothing but the Audubon Society through the wall full of windows. I also saw the village council members gathered. The inside of the resort reminded me of the interior of a ski lodge. In the middle of the open, large room, a stone fireplace warmed the room with the roaring fire. All the walls were floor-to-ceiling windows, giving the most spectacular views of Whispering Falls. I headed around the large fireplace to the other side of the room. 2 large farm tables and benches stood on each side. Amethyst had set them with dishes, utensils, chalices, and cloth napkins, ready for someone to sit and partake of the delicious smells coming from the boiling pot on the gas stove. Amethyst was a Southern good-sider who happened to come to Whispering Falls to open the bed and breakfast. She fit in perfectly. As soon as I turned the corner of the fireplace, Oscar noticed me and waved me over to one of the couches where the village council members were gathered. "All is good." I referred to the Mr. Sandman sprinkles and held up my wrist, from which the empty black velvet pouch dangled. "Did you have the meeting?" I asked if I missed it. "No." Gerald Regula twisted one side of his handlebar mustache between his fingers. He looked dapper in his usual top hat, tailed suit coat, white shirt, and yellow ascot tied around his neck. He was British and very proper. He was also very charming, especially when tourists came into the Gathering Grove tea shop, where he read their tea leaves without them knowing. He was also good at getting a read on other spiritualists in our village, which broke our #1 village rule against reading other spiritualists without their permission. Like I said, he was from a British village that had much different rules than we did in Kentucky. "Amethyst didn't get the paper this morning, and she had already planned a little get-together tonight with the guests of the full moon." At the sight of all the meandering tourists, he snapped his eyes from behind the wire-rimmed glasses perched on his nose. "We're going to just have to let things play out while you two are camping." Oscar gestured between me and Petunia. An audible groan escaped from Gerald. He definitely disapproved of Petunia being gone from home, just as she had suggested he would. "We will be fine." Petunia ran a loving hand down Gerald's arm. He pouted. "It's time you get home so Faith can leave." Gerald grumbled a few more times and got up. "We'll keep you company." Izzy grabbed a fistful of Chandra's cape. "Yes, we will." Chandra got up and readily agreed with Izzy when she realized Izzy was telling her it was time to go. Petunia got up and walked with the 3 of them around the fireplace to see them off. "Are you sure you're going to be okay?" Oscar leaned in and whispered in my ear. "Wow." Mr. Prince Charming batted at my charm bracelet, his way of telling Oscar that he would take care of me just fine. "I get it." Oscar put his hands in the air as he focused on Mr. Prince Charming. "She's my wife, and I still worry about her." "There's no need to worry." I ran one hand down Mr. Prince Charming and kissed Oscar on the cheek, making them both happy. "What an adorable cat." Paris had come over with a few of the bird watchers. "I saw him today at the shop when he chased off the spangled." "Are you sure you saw the spangled?" the man asked. "Do you think we're going to get a glimpse of the spangled?" Paris asked me. "You're the one who claimed you saw it." The man put his hand out. "Webster Jones. I take all the photos for the local Audubon Society. I'm very interested to see the spangled smoky momoko, since there's not been a sighting in the United States for many, many years. I'd like to find the nest." Petunia fidgeted. I gulped. Little did he know he was actually closer to the spangled smoky momoko's nest, in Petunia's head of hair. "I'm just saying that I'll believe the sighting when I see it." Webster gave Paris the side-eye. "Are you saying that I lied?" She put her hand on her hip and glared at the man. They exchanged looks that could kill. Now, another woman tisked after she overheard her fellow Audubon Society member arguing. "We are going to try our best to find out what Paris has seen." She pinched a smile, took a drink of the sweet tea in her hand, and looked at me. "Tammy Harp. I'm the newest addition to the club." "How new is that?" I asked, and actually enjoyed getting to know the group. 2 weeks ago, and we are delighted to have her. Cindy Sams, president of the club," she told me. A pair of binoculars hung around her neck. "We are very excited about the campout. I'm so glad you thought of it." "There's no better time to see the spangled if it is here." I referred to the glow of the bird. "Tell me about your binoculars. They look pretty fancy." "These are Sky Genius." She lifted them off her chest and rotated them around for me to get a good look. They're very lightweight, and the power is amazing. They're too powerful for bird watching. Webster looked at them. Really, those are for nosy neighbors. They are not. Cindy brushed him off. If we are going to see one of the last spangled, I think they will come in handy. I don't want to miss a thing. Going back to the spangled, Webster changed topics. I'd read an article about how they were in mating season in the Congo, and there are only 2 other noted spangled still alive. My intuition told me he was not buying the sighting, which really made things easier for me. Maybe he was the one I needed to talk to and let him know we'd not seen anything like a spangled here, and maybe Paris was mistaken. I would only do this in the hopes they'd leave Whispering Falls. Last I heard, there were only 2 pairs that are still breeding. Cindy Sams was telling the group about the annual Audubon meeting she'd attended in the spring, where they discussed the rare species. That's why it's so important we get the one here and get it into a zoo where we can breed them. Paris didn't help matters as she tried to convince them they were doing the right thing. Why are they dying? Petunia asked. My gut said she was trying to get a handle on why the bird had sought her out and what soul was deep inside of her hair. Poachers, Paris spoke up. They want the feathers to sell. In fact, I'm not sure if you follow the Kentucky Derby, where they featured a hat from one of the billionaire's wife's hat. The feathers were from a spangle. It's a shame. We know the Derby. I nodded and made a mental note to check out that hat. As soon as we saw it on the TV, we jumped in our van and began the protest, Tammy mentioned. What's so important about them? Petunia asked. Out of the corner of my eye, I could see Cindy, the president, strapping her camping pack on and grabbing her stick as if she were ready to head out. I couldn't help but notice how she had dropped her stick when a man walked into the room. They seemed to have the same reaction to each other and exchanged a few words before he noticed me looking at him. Their feathers are rare and used in many hats around the world. Tammy nodded and looked at everyone. If there was one here, we'd have to make sure it was preserved, especially in Kentucky. And that's why I'm here. The man who Cindy didn't seem to care for had joined their little group. He wore the same sort of outfit, but had a patch sewn on his jacket. Adam Vetter, zoologist at the Preble Exotic Zoo. He made eye contact with everyone there. He carried a fancy walking stick carved with a nice handle that resembled a bird. The bird's beak appeared to be gold. I'd gotten word there was a rare sighting of the spangled smoky momoko, and if that's the case, we will be taking it back to the zoo. You can't do that. Webster's chest popped out. You are the reason these animals become extinct. They thrive in their natural environment. Petunia lifted a shaky hand and stuck it deep inside of her messy updo as though she were checking on the bird. Isn't an exotic zoo the best place for extinct creatures to reproduce and be reintroduced back into the natural environment? Tammy seemed to have asked a good newbie question that made me interested in hearing what Adam had to say. We do our best to do that, he said with a stern face. I could feel the follow-up but coming. But some species... Adam's eyes searched Webster's vest for his name. As Webster has suggested, do better in their environment. At the zoo, we can tag them, feed them, give them a good life to monitor them before we send them out into the world. We know of 2 spangled smoky momokos that did thrive in a zoo a few 100 years ago. With new technology and better care, we are sure we can bring them back from extinction fairly quickly. Who told you about the possible sighting in Whispering Falls? I asked, only to see what was outside of the village and if I had to be concerned with it. I think we're ready to go. He pointed toward Cindy, who was gathering up the society members, ignoring my question. Tammy, Webster, and Paris followed Adam over to the group. That's odd how he didn't answer you, Petunia said, and checked her hair again. Yes. I watched the group and how he interacted with them. I couldn't help but notice how Cindy Sams had reacted to him. No, but I'll keep an eye out. Petunia's words hit my gut, sending my intuition into a flying color of aura around my head. Keep an eye out was the term we'd been using about the crow flying at midnight. The little signs had proven to help me as a spiritualist, not only with the homeopathic gift, but also my intuitionist gift. And Petunia's words weren't lazy. There was a meaning behind them, telling me to keep an eye on Adam Vedder. Chapter 9. The trees whispered faint coo-coo sounds. To the mortal ear, it would be like hearing the rustling of the leaves from a gentle nighttime breeze. It was a constant reminder to keep an ear and eye out for any sort of secret meeting taking place between now and midnight. The moon was full over the trees and gave off much-needed light between the leaves, creating a glow along the path as Petunia led the group. I was the last one in the hiking line, since I was familiar with the area and no one would stray. It also gave me a good position to see everyone and hear what conversations might be taking place. "I've never seen a cat stay next to their owner like that." Webster was walking in front of me. "He's always been this way." I looked down at Mr. Prince Charming trotting alongside of me. Webster turned around, still walking, and took a few snapshots of Mr. Prince Charming. I swear the darn cat knew exactly what was going on, and he smiled. My bag bounced up and down with a gentle thud with each step, making me fully aware Madame Torres was inside and keeping watch as well. "How long have you been taking photos for the Audubon Society?" I wanted to find out more about the society and the people in it, without him becoming alarmed, just in case I needed to watch him. "About 2 years. I was a photographer for a lot of different magazines, and I'd gone on a gig for National Geographic for a bird segment. They were long days of sitting still and making sure you didn't scare the birds." He slowed his steps, coming to walk side by side with me. "At first I hated the silence and sitting there. It was no problem for the rest of the crew since they'd been used to it, but I was new. One day turned into 3 months of watching this same species. It was when the gig was over that I went back to the hurried life and found myself riddled with anxiety." There was a sweetness to Webster as he talked. He was calm and sure of himself. "I paid a very expensive therapist to tell me that I enjoyed the slow bird-watching lifestyle. She was right." He shook his head. "I quit my big job and started to apply for bird gigs across the United States." "So they pay you? The Audubon Society?" I asked. "Cindy doesn't. I'm a member of this chapter, but the big society does pay me to go on different expeditions. If I didn't need money to live off of, I'd do it for free." He laughed. "But I've got something in the fire that might give me a little more financial freedom if it pans out." Apparently his keen eye saw something, because then he started to snap a lot of photos of the woods. Not too long after that, we reached the camping site Petunia had picked out for the night. There were teepee tents set up around a roaring campfire, along with a big cauldron pot of warm stew. "Do you honestly think I was going to get into a tent?" Petunia asked me. She must have seen the look on my face. I'm a mom. I have a bad back from running around trying to catch Orin or carry the boy. If I'm not in my bed, I brought it here. We watched as the society members oohed and awed over the setup for a few minutes. "Everyone has their own teepee." Petunia's voice caught their attentions. "I know we're staying up most of the night to try and catch a glimpse of the spangled smoky Momoko, so I went to the liberty of making a nice beef stew for everyone's belly, along with some hot coffee to keep us awake. Or tea." My intuition sent a kick to my gut. "Tea?" I whispered to Petunia when I saw the mugs were from Gathering Grove and that Gerald was the tea leaf reader as well as her husband. "Mm-hmm. And you might want to add some Mr. Sandman sprinkles to the stew." She raised a brow. I smiled at her genius idea. "Or a little forget-me potion?" I merely suggested, in case they did get a glimpse of the bird and needed something to wipe their memory clean. "That's why we're here." She winked and walked over to the group. Various conversations went on between all of them. My keen ear, along with Petunia and Mr. Prince Charming, heard nothing that sparked any idea of a secret meeting. I was able to put a little Mr. Sandman sprinkles in the pot of stew without anyone noticing. It was enough to get them to twilight sleep and get us through the midnight hour, just in case a crow did fly by. It was insurance. I tried to watch to make sure everyone got some stew, but looked away when a couple of them gathered to talk. When I saw Tammy had lifted her spoon to her mouth and that Webster and Paris both had bowls, I was satisfied everyone would be taking a nap during the midnight hour. Mr. Prince Charming and I found a big log to sit on, with a perfect view of the camping area and in view of all the society members. Paris bounced around from group to group, smiling and laughing. She went back for seconds on the stew. Adam was talking with his hands as he told some story to Webster. I watched as Webster's jaw started to tense, and he leaned in to say something to Adam. Whatever his words were, they were enough to make Adam spit next to Webster's feet before he stormed off. Webster ran his hand through his hair and glanced around the group, looking under his brows with disgust on his face. Tammy must have seen it because she came over and said something to Webster, starting up a conversation with him. Adam seemed to engage with everyone but Cindy. If he wanted to get in good with the team, you'd figure he'd get in good with her, since she was the president. Or maybe the snarl she had on her nose when he passed her detoured him from talking to her. A couple of the members definitely disliked Adam. "Did you get enough to eat?" I'd gotten up and walked over to Cindy when I noticed she was finished eating. "Oh, yes." She was sitting alone in one of the camping chairs with a marshmallow stuck on a stick in the fire. "I love burnt marshmallows. You want one?" "Sure." My gut went soaring as I realized how deeply troubled Cindy was inside. Her short, dark hair was cut above her ears in loose curls. She had a hollow look in her eyes. The lines around them deepened when she smiled at me. "What all do you keep in those vests?" I made small talk while I waited for the Mr. Sandman sprinkles to kick in. "We keep all sorts of birdwatching equipment, like binoculars," she said, and took things out as she told me what they were. "A field guide for when you want to know specifics of the species you're watching. A couple of sticky bird feeders." She pulled out something that looked like those toilet paper rolls with peanut butter and seeds on them we made in kindergarten. "A spawning scope, a camera, of course, a record log to record bird habits you're watching." She shrugged. "There's just a lot." It seems like there's a lot of alone time out there. I really wanted to get in touch with her troubled side and maybe see why she wasn't a fan of Adam, but really, all I felt was loneliness. When I didn't see a wedding ring, I figured she was married to her birds. "It's pretty good for the soul. I think you have to be able to sit with yourself and be comfortable in that silent space before you can have real relationships." Her words of wisdom felt to me as though she lived or tried to live by them. From the way she was talking, she had this whole Zen thing down, something I tried to serve in potions to people. But why was I getting the lonely feeling from her if she was comfortable in the silence of sitting still and waiting for the perfect feathered creature to come her way? Regardless, she was right about making a good marshmallow. After a couple of them, I saw Webster stop talking to Paris and decided to head over to her. I wanted to see what she was all about, especially since she'd left the potion I'd specifically made for her at the shop. She was sitting on a log outside of the teepee she'd claimed. She had her head buried in her journal, lost in her words. I made a quick trip through my bag, making sure Madame Torres was still in there, recording different conversations I couldn't lend an ear to. I got out the star anise powder potion I'd made for Paris and carried it over to her teepee with me. "Hi there." I popped a squat on the ground next to her. "Am I intruding?" "I'm recording the events of the Spangled. I try to record everything. You know, factual records of extinct species are the only records the Audubon Society will record in their database." She quickly scribbled something. "Are you enjoying your time with us?" "It's good. I've not camped out in a long time. Actually," I tried to recall, "I've never camped, unless you count me sneaking out of my bedroom window when I was a kid and hanging out with Oscar all night and eating ding-dongs under his big tree." The memory made me smile. "Oscar, huh?" she asked. "The cop guy at the full moon?" "He's my husband." I still blushed when I said that. "He's so cute. Lucky you." She put her notebook away. "I'm single. That's probably why I agreed to be the society secretary, hence all the writing." "Secretary? That's cool. I bet your hands get tired from recording every single thing." I was trying to think of something to slip in the potion, and maybe something to help her tired hands was just what the potion needed. "I recalled you saying something about Misfortune earlier." "Oh, that." She threw her head back and laughed. "While you were in the shop, I was busy mixing a few of my best homeopathic cures just for you. And when you have those misfortunes, you can rub this lotion on your hands, and the amazing smell will make it all go away." I held the bottle out. "I'd love to give it to you." Her eyes lit up. I can't take that gorgeous bottle from you." She patted the pockets of her vest. "Let me pay you." "Nonsense." I put the bottle in her hand and placed my hands over hers. Her misfortune came to me as crystal clear as the moon was full. Poor Paris wouldn't have the fortune to get any photos of the spangle. Unfortunate for me, since I was hoping to get some insight on why I had this bird charm and why we were here when I'd rather be in my own bed next to my adorable husband. I made it for you. I patted her hand before I removed mine. It was my pleasure. Thank you so much. She was sincere, and I liked her. Too bad Petunia and I weren't going to give them what they'd come for. But if you could tell me more about the pet lady and why the spangled was with her. I don't think you saw a spangled. I laughed nervously. I've seen some of the photos, and it didn't have that fancy feather glistening everyone claims is the species' fame. It definitely had the glow. She was adamant, and I knew I needed to change her mind. Petunia's really good with all animals. I wished at the moment she wasn't, because Paris and I both looked over at Petunia. She had a couple of birds perched on her arms like a scarecrow, and Mr. Prince Charming mesmerized at her feet. I even wished he'd act like a cat just for the sheer sake of being a cat, to throw them off. The problem was Petunia had never lived as a mortal, and how she thought she fit in when around them was definitely not working. Your cat? You must have trained him good. She shook her head. But Petunia's very nice. I really feel like she's hiding the spangle. I've been keeping my eye on her. I don't think so. I believe you're mistaking her for being a very happy soul that just goes with the flow. Plus, I waved my hand in the air like I was waving off any notion Paris might have about the spangled, though she was completely right. The lighting in the shop is very low, and I have that chandelier with all the crystals. You know crystals. They flutter prisms all over the place. I looked deep in her eyes. I'm sure you saw the prisms hit the bird's feathers. I mean, Mr. Prince Charming scared the poor thing and it took off. For a second, she seemed to ponder what I was saying, but then she began to shake her head. No. She shook even harder. I clearly saw it was a spangled. I'm not sure why you won't believe me. It's as though you don't want to save the bird. She stood up and looked down at me. You don't want to save the spangled? Tammy gasped, throwing her hand up to her chest. Not at all. I pushed myself up to stand and brushed the dirt away from my backside. I was trying to tell Paris how I'd never seen a bird that looked like a spangled, and it could be possible the prisms of my chandelier had made the bird's feathers glisten. Is it possible? Tammy looked over at Paris. I guess anything is possible, but I know what I saw. Paris gritted her teeth. She twirled around on her toes and disappeared into the teepee. Don't mind her. Some of these people are really passionate about this thing. Tammy laughed, making me feel somewhat better about offending Paris. You aren't? I asked. Like I said earlier, I'm new to all this. I was looking for something to keep me company between my jobs, Tammy said. Did you get enough to eat? Petunia asked us on a quick flyby. We nodded. She's so funny, Tammy laughed. Those animals love her. That is what makes her shop so awesome. She takes pride and care in every little detail. I watched Petunia walk around to each member of the society to see if they wanted more food. Details are very important in any retail. That's what I used to do, and I'm looking to get out of it altogether. Tammy was very personable. What type of job are you looking for? I asked. Her type. She pointed to Petunia and laughed. Petunia was surrounded by the others, minus Paris, and a couple of birds, along with Mr. Prince Charming. I'd better get my cat before he becomes her cat, I joked. I hope y'all have luck. Well, I'm not banking on it. Even I've noticed over the past couple of weeks at our meeting, Paris is a little too aggressive. Tammy rolled her eyes and waved over her shoulder at me before she disappeared into her teepee. That left me, Petunia, Cindy, Webster, and Adam, plus Mr. Prince Charming. Webster was fiddling with his camera. He would click on a lens and look up to the moon. He'd take a couple of photos, look at the digital image on the camera screen, and then shake his head and change the lens again. I watched as he did this several times before he seemed to give up and go into his teepee. The Mr. Sandman sprinkles were kicking in as the midnight hour was just before us. Cindy's head twisted around the camp. She must have realized she was alone with Webster, and she immediately went to her teepee. It's 11:45. If we take a couple of hours, we can get up at 3 a.m., Petunia told Adam. That's probably a great idea since the Spangled's awake hours are 2:30 until 4:30 a.m. Adam put his hand over his mouth and let out a big yawn. I'm usually in bed at this time. I hope you guys make sure to give a wake-up call. Cindy emerged from the teepee and walked around to the others, dragging all of them out near the campfire. What is she doing? Petunia had a look of horror on her face. I don't know. I've never been on one of these birdwatching trips. I crossed my arms and waited to see what was happening. Before we take a little break and let our food digest, I wanted to make sure everyone is prepared. Cindy addressed the group. I'll get my camera film all ready. Does everyone have their film in their camera and their walking sticks? Webster asked. There's a lot of brush out here where we might have to push out of the way for a real view. I do encourage you to let me know if you see the spangled before me. I'd like to devise a plan on how we can catch the bird to ensure safety for not only us, but for the bird itself. Adam opened his satchel. I've got a step-by-step plan. He took out some papers and began to distribute them to the group. Why should we help you? Paris asked and looked at the paper. I'm not. Cindy tossed her paper into the campfire. It's for the safety of the species. We are all here to see the spectacular bird. I'm here to make sure it doesn't become extinct. He made a very appealing case as he rambled on about the statistics of survival in the exotic zoo and how the birds would thrive in a controlled environment that would bring them back into their natural habitat. As he spoke, he got some lotion out of one of the vest pockets and began to apply it. Not to mention, if we can bring it to the zoo, it'll give us time to get a law passed on stricter regulations and hefty prison sentences if anyone decides to poach them for the feathers. He continued to lather up the lotion. Also, I'm deathly allergic to bees. Please let me know if you see any. Right down that trail is where our local bees live. Petunia pointed to the trail. I suggest you not go down that way because you will get stung. They are very protective of their hives. Thank you. I'll be sure not to go there. He nodded at her. Petunia sat up a little straighter, making me wonder if she were falling for this guy's pitch. I cleared my throat and got her attention. When she looked over, I gave a slight nod toward her teepee. I got up, and Mr. Prince Charming stayed around the fire to keep an ear out. I also took my bag off and put it on the ground so Madame Torres could record the continued conversation. Don't fall for his speech, I warned Petunia when we met away from them. If anything, you can make sure they're breeding, and then after you've successfully done that, you can contact them then. I know, but he does make the zoo sound so nice. She rubbed her hair. The feathers. Poor baby. My heart aches for anything to happen to him. That's why we have to make sure they don't see the spangled bird tonight. I glanced around her shoulder when I heard some shuffling. They were all going into their teepees. Hopefully the Mr. Sandman sprinkles will kick in, and they will get up at 3 like they planned and not see a thing. I sucked in a deep breath. Now go get some sleep. I'll have Madame Torres wake us up. She nodded, and when she did, the beak of the bird shot out. I told the teenagers to keep a lookout. She turned her head where the edge of the woods were all lit up with twinkling lights. The teens had surrounded us. Hide him. My eyes grew big. She tapped on her hair, and he jerked back into the depth of her updo. The camp grew very quiet in the few minutes that followed. There were sounds of hooves, owls, crickets, and alike from all the creatures in our woods. I knew they'd been following me and Petunia around and had surrounded the camp to keep us safe. I'd put Madame Torres next to the pallet where I'd lain until it was time to get up. I also had her put a clock on display so I could mind the time. We were just shy of midnight. I got up and parted the opening of the teepee to look out into the camp. There were a few teepees with lights on. I noticed Adam had a visit in his teepee, only I couldn't make out whether it was a female or male silhouette. All I knew was that there were 2 people in his teepee, causing me to raise a brow. Why aren't they napping? I asked out loud. Cuckoo, cuckoo. Madame Torres's globe flashed a bright light. I turned to look at her. There was a shuffling outside, just as the clock in her waves turned midnight. Ah! Ah! The loud screech of a crow pierced the outside just before a blood-curdling scream echoed around me. Mr. Prince Charming jumped on his hind legs and began to bat the air with both front paws and growled up to the sky. I ran to the opening of the teepee, and just as I emerged, a crow flew directly in the path of the full moon, sending me to my knees. For a second, I watched the crow as it circled around, not noticing how Mr. Prince Charming had darted past me. The bird's beady black eyes stared at me. Its beak glowed golden. I doubled over, holding my stomach like the beak was pecking at me. The pain continued as my head swirled with iridescent golds and greens. "The spangled," I whispered, steadying myself with my hands as I tried to push up to my feet. "The spangled." I wobbled to my feet and tore my eyes away from the soaring crow. I sucked in a deep breath and straightened my back. My eyes drew up from the ground to the tree line where the trail started and where Mr. Prince Charming waited patiently for me. After we'd made eye contact, he darted off into the dark night. A line of lightning bugs trailed behind him, giving me a lighted path. The sounds of my feet hitting the dirt path, my shallow breaths, and the quick beating of my heart were thunderous in my ears. In the distance, I could see the tip of Mr. Prince Charming's tail waving before it pointed like a human finger. Immediately, the teenagers took flight in the direction Mr. Prince Charming showed us to go. The brush was thick, and the sounds of the deep forest were unfamiliar, but when I saw Eloise standing there, I stopped, though she didn't see me. My breath went back to normal, and my pounding heart slowed down. Mr. Prince Charming trotted past me and headed straight toward Eloise. He did his signature figure-8 movements around her ankles, forcing her to look down, then slide her gaze to me. The lightning bugs flew over to them, their tails focusing on the body that lay on the ground next to her. A pool of blood congealed around the head. "Adam Vetter," I gasped, bringing my hand over my eyes. Chapter 10. "How did you get here so quickly?" I asked in a shaky voice. Oscar stood over Adam Vetter's body. Eloise was next to me, still eerily quiet. "This is very odd." Eloise broke the silence. She closed her eyes and lifted her arms in the air. "The bees live here. No one had traveled this trail for years. I get all my honey here. Ask Petunia. She keeps the bees occupied while I get what I need from their hives." Oscar put an arm around me to stop me from trembling, but it didn't help. Eloise spoke in a tone that chilled me to the bone. Oscar had gotten to the trail within seconds after I'd arrived. He had tried to get a pulse and even revive Adam, but after a few minutes of that he stopped, realizing Adam was not coming back to life. Adam's head was split open, and his hiking stick appeared to be the weapon. It lay next to his body. They must have hit him so hard. The gold tip of the bird's beak, which was the handle, had frank blood and hair on it. Blood was still coming from his head. "I'd asked Faith to call me at the station if she heard anything." I loved how Oscar had used other spiritualists' gifts to help out in his job. "She took it a bit further and sat at the station with me. When she perked up, I didn't have to wait to see what she was hearing. I looked at the clock and used my wand to get here." I glanced down at his waist. Though it was covered by his officer's coat, I knew his wand was tucked in his pants. "Colton Lance should be here soon." Oscar looked around at the surroundings as he referred to the other officer of Whispering Falls. Oscar started his investigation by taping off the crime scene, using the trees as the borders. "How did you come up on him?" Oscar asked his Aunt Eloise. "I'd heard the crow and watched as he flew past the moon at midnight. Chills had crawled up my arms and the back of my neck," she said in a mysterious tone. "I was minding the garden. I put down my hoe and followed the crow." Working in a garden in the midnight hour might seem odd, but not for Eloise. It was the perfect time for her to work on her special herbs and rows of ingredients only a spiritualist would love. Eloise's main waking hour was midnight, and her day usually ended in the morning cleansing ceremony through Whispering Falls. "June?" Oscar asked. "I was in my teepee after I'd given the group some Mr. Sandman sprinkles in their stew Petunia had made. It was enough to put them in twilight sleep. I recalled everyone having a bowl in their hand, even Adam. I'm not sure how Adam got here, and certainly have no idea who would have been awake enough to hit him so hard to have killed him." "Did you see anything out of the ordinary at the campsite?" asked Oscar. "Everything was going well until we went to take a nap." My jaw dropped and my eyes popped open. "Oscar," I gasped, "did my sleeping potion not work?" It was always one of my greatest fears for the potions to lose their magic. "Obviously someone didn't eat it." Oscar's words made me think back. Everyone had a bowl and chatted. I recalled seeing even the small group that consisted of Paris, Webster, and Tammy, remembering them talking. "Did Adam?" Oscar asked. "You know, I didn't see him eat any because he was too busy trying to convince everyone to let him take the spangled smoky momoko if they did catch one. My jaw tensed. He even had something planned out on paper and distributed it to everyone. Everyone but Cindy, Petunia said. Oh dear, this isn't good. She shoved her hand deep in her hair. The spangled is getting restless. I thought we were going to have a couple of hours and let him come out in my teepee. She sounded angry. I'm afraid I'm not going to be able to keep him in much longer. Is it such a bad thing for them to see him? Oscar asked her. There was a flash in the woods that only Petunia, Oscar, and I would recognize with our eyes. Then Colton walked down the trail leading to the crime scene. If we don't want national attention brought to us, then yes, it's a bad idea, I reminded him. I tried to catch up on all the details of your report. Colton looked at Oscar after he'd walked up and nodded to me and Petunia. Oscar quickly caught him up on what I'd told him about the camp and the sleeping potion, and how Adam had tried to convince the group to let him get the bird for his exotic zoo. I wish Oscar could just wave a wand so we could know who killed him, I said to Petunia while Colton and Oscar talked. You and I both know that's not how our gifts work. She was right. As much as I wanted to try to create a potion or see into Madame Torres to learn what had happened, our magical world didn't work like that, which meant Oscar and Colton actually had to investigate to get to the killer. I had left Madame Torres at the campfire to record any conversations. My eyes grew, meeting Petunia's. The sound of sirens echoed into the midnight hours, followed up by some screeching tires and the rattle of wheels barreling down the trail. Here, sister, I heard Constance Karima from the tree line before she appeared, her eyes focused on the body of Adam Vetters. I've got him. She hurried over, her house dress swooshed around her. We aren't ready for you to take him yet. Oscar stopped her shy of the body, but didn't get to Patience in time. Sister, Patience yelled and pointed. It's our ghost. Oscar looked over his shoulder, giving just enough space for Constance to shove past him and practically knock Colton out of the way. Are you sure? I bolted over to them with Petunia on my heels. I thought your ghost was a woman. Who said that? Constance grinned ear to ear as she looked down at the corpse. He's delicious, and I can't wait to dig into him. It sounded oh so gross, but it was their gift and they were passionate about their ghosts and all things dead bodies. I just thought... I blinked a few times and wondered where on earth I'd gotten the notion their ghost was a female. Anyways, where's the ghost now? Not around. Constance bent down and looked at Adam's head. Knocked out at just the right spot to give him sudden head trauma. Still squatting, she twisted her head over her right shoulder. Her eyes grew dark, her voice low. Someone knew exactly where to hit him in order to have instant death. The evidence was enough for Oscar to walk over to the group and tell them he would have to take them to the station for official statements. We have to find out who didn't eat the stew and who has medical knowledge, I whispered to Petunia and gestured my head to the side so we could get some privacy to talk. I'm not sure where we went wrong. There was a deep worry in her eyes. Can we go back to the teepees and discuss this? The spangled is driving me nuts, very active. I took one more look around. Oscar and Colton had gone back to consulting with the Karima sisters. The group had stood up and were waiting on what to do next. Cindy was the only one who was still sitting down and had a blank expression on her face. Petunia and I slipped out without anyone seeing us and headed back down the trail. Once we were inside of her teepee, the spangled smoky momoko flew out of her hair. The majestic creature took my breath away as he spread his wings. The purple, thin feathers had an iridescent glow, making it hard to look away. They are one of the oldest birds, dating back to 40 million years. Petunia started to tell me about the bird. The closest thing to the same look today are butterflies. How? I mean, what makes their glow? I watched as the bird turned, making different colors appear. It's the light that is scattering off the feather's surface and a smooth surface of melanin pigment granules within the feather protein. She was so knowledgeable about animals that she amazed me. Birds of today do not have this type of pigment granules, and that's one reason the spangled is so rare and sought after. A tear dripped down her cheek. She cocked her head to the side and started to chirp. The bird responded, and they carried on a dialogue I wished I could hear. The bird flew past her head, and I tried to shield myself as it came toward me, but it landed on my forearm. June, I'd like you to meet Adam Vetter." Her words sent my head spinning in all sorts of directions. His ghost is now in the bird. Chapter 11. It was late. Oscar had come back to the camp and woke up all the Audubon members. None of them seemed extremely upset, though Paris and Tammy did shed a tear. Webster murmured something about Adam getting what he deserved, and Cindy remained tight-lipped. Instead of making the members of the Audubon Society head to the station, Oscar and Colton had given them warnings not to leave Whispering Falls until the group members had given them statements. "What about the sighting?" Cindy looked at Oscar. "We are here to do the Spangled sighting. He wasn't even part of our group, so why do we have to suffer?" Her lack of empathy didn't surprise me, since I'd been able to watch her body language toward Adam. In my head, I put her at the top of the suspect list. "If the Spangled is in Whispering Falls, you'll be able to camp out another time." He didn't leave any room for more discussion. "Petunia, can you please lead the group back to the Full Moon Resort while Colton and I check out the campsite?" Petunia nodded. "I need everyone to leave all of their equipment here." Oscar's words were met with groans and moans. "I'm not leaving my camera here." Webster's jaw tensed. "That's fine." Oscar pointed from Colton to Webster. "Colton, do you mind taking his camera and putting it in an evidence bag?" "Evidence bag?" Webster seemed offended. "Why do you think it's evidence?" "All the cameras might have some photos on there leading up to Adam's death." Oscar watched as Colton practically pried the camera from Webster. "You better be careful. That's a $5,000 camera." When Colton took the equipment bag, Webster sighed even louder. "That's got at least $10,000 worth of equipment in there. Be careful." Not long after that, Oscar and I went home. "We will revisit all this in the morning." Oscar suggested we go home for the night. I thought it was a great idea. "It's too dark to see." The familiar smell of home curled around my nose, giving me the first real sense that I was safe. Any of them could be the killer, I told him, and fell down into the fluffy couch in the combination family room and kitchen. "But I do think Cindy is hiding something." "Like what?" Oscar pulled his tucked sheriff shirt out of his pants and started to unbutton it. "I'm not sure, but she really dislikes Adam. It was all over her face." I recalled a few times I'd seen her glaring at him. "Did you notice she was the only female who didn't shed a single tear or even gasp at the fact that he was murdered?" "We will definitely be digging into all of their backgrounds and see who was connected to Adam." Oscar always started investigations with people's backgrounds. It was the most logical place to start. Me? I might have just laid into Cindy to see how she knew Adam and not waste any time looking into her. That was why Oscar was the cop and not me. "You coming to bed?" Oscar had started down the hallway leading to the bedroom. The little family room had all the comforts of home. The natural wood crown molding accented the vibrant orange fabric of the chairs and couches. There were 2 bedrooms, only one of which I used. The kitchen window over the sink had a very nice view of downtown Whispering Falls. There was a kitchen table in there too, but Oscar and I rarely sat there to eat. Down the hall were the 2 bedrooms and 1 bathroom. "Not just yet," I smiled. "Come on." Oscar put out his hand for me to take. Mr. Prince Charming had jumped up on the back of the couch behind my head, and Madame Torres glowed from my bag, which sat on the coffee table. "A good night's sleep is something we can both use." "I'll be there in a few," I assured him, but met with a reluctant look. Oscar knew better than to try to convince me to go to bed, with all the swirling in my head, though. "Fine. But don't leave this house." He looked at me from under his thick brows before he kissed me and disappeared down the hallway. When I heard the bedroom door shut, I leaned over and dragged my bag off the coffee table. "What do you know?" I pulled Madame Torres out of my bag and lifted her to my face. The globe was black, with gold stars floating all around. "Madame Torres," I called, and tapped her glass globe with my finger. "Wakey, wakey. I know you're up. I saw your light." I hated to pull out the big guns, but she left me with no choice. "You know, if you don't respond to me, I can take you to the Goodwill in Locust Grove and donate you." I let out a happy sigh. Mr. Prince Charming was purring so loud because he knew what I was going to say, and I was sure he'd wished for this situation to occur. After that, you'd be stuck in there, never able to communicate again. Mr. Prince Charming was humming right along. Oh, shut up. The green glow illuminated the ball, which made her red lips stand out on her purple face. She'd put on a turban over the top of her red, unruly hair. I was trying to get some much-needed shut-eye. I bet you were. I eyed her suspiciously. I need you to play back the conversations at the campfire. It's late. She spoke in a tone of flat boredom. I'm tired. I gripped around her glass globe and gave it a good shake up and down and back and forth. Stop it! I've got a sensitive stomach, she cried out. I get seasick. I steadied the ball and brought her back up to my face. Are you going to play back the conversation? I asked. Madame Torres disappeared, and like a movie, the conversation started to play, along with some video footage. The group was around the campfire. I could see Cindy, Paris, Tammy, and Webster, but not Adam. Do you honestly think those two know anything about birds? Tammy had asked the group after Petunia and I walked off. I think they're keeping an eye out for their own sake, Paris noted. I'm telling you that I saw the spangled smoky Momoko in her shop, the one with the short hair. She was referring to me. That cat of hers scared it off. That's when the messy one ran after it. I did a little digging and noticed she owned a pet store. Do you think she knows about the bird and is keeping it there? Cindy Sams finally opened her mouth. It's worth a shot to look. I did take some photos of the town today. About what time was that? Webster asked Paris. It was right after we'd left the tea store. Gerald would have been so offended by Paris calling it a store instead of a shop. I went straight over to the Charming shop because I'd met that lady in there after... She clapped her hands together. Those two old women asked me about a ghost or something. The old women dressed in housecoats? Webster laughed. I took a lot of photos of them. Very entertaining. There are a lot of weirdos around here. Cindy still had a nasty look on her face. I think it's kind of charming. Tammy instantly warmed my heart. If the Spangled is here, I don't blame it. It's gorgeous here. Safe. Safe? Adam came into view. Safe as being in a naturally formed habitat I will have made for the bird at the Preble Exotic Zoo. I've about had enough of this zoo crap. Cindy stood up and huffed away. What's wrong with her? Webster asked Adam. She seems to have a beef with you, Paris joked. She does. Adam sat down in Cindy's place. He clasped his hands in front of him and leaned his elbows on his thighs. He looked into the fire. I'm her ex-husband. A collective gasp came from the group and from me. Chapter 12. After hearing the big bombshell that the victim was the ex of Cindy Sams, the president of the society, I'd woken Oscar up from his deep sleep. June, I'm glad you discovered this, but I'll check it out tomorrow. He rolled over again and fell right back to sleep. I knew he wasn't worried Cindy or any of the others would slip out of town because there were so many teenagers that had let us know and stopped them. I spent the rest of the night waiting for the sun to rise so I could head down the hill to visit Ophelia Biblio, Colton's wife. They were newlyweds and the most adorable couple. Ophelia owned Ever After Books. She was a witch and would have all the books I'd need to research Cindy Sams and Adam Vetter along with their history. With Oscar still fast asleep, I quickly got ready for the day since I knew I wouldn't be coming home anytime soon. I opted to wear a jean-short jumpsuit with a hot pink belt and a pair of hot pink flats. It would be a warm day, and I needed to be able to move about so I could find out as much about these Audubon Society members as I could. Psst! June! I heard someone call my name when I walked past the gathering rock. Petunia walked out from behind it. Petunia, what's wrong? I immediately thought of Orrin when I didn't see him strapped on her back, but when I noticed her hair was out of the updo and freely flowing, as if it had been brushed, I knew it had to do with the Spangled. Where's the bird? I have no idea. Her eyes shifted left and right. After I took all those people back to the Tresort, he flew out and hasn't come back. Have you been out all night? I asked, and noticed the black circles under her eyes. Have you been up all night? She snapped back. I'm sorry. It's just that I didn't get to talk to Adam before he flew off. I never got to be alone with him. She didn't have to tell me she meant his bird soul. The thing with some mortals was that if some of them had unfinished business, their souls would come back in animals they loved. This was why Adam had come back as the Spangled, which gave us more reason to look into his background with the bird. "What am I going to do?" Petunia asked, flustered. "I want you to go home and get some sleep, or go to your shop and take it easy if you don't want to go home." It was solid advice, since she wouldn't be able to do any good to anyone with her mind all jumbled. Go cuddle with your animals. I have some great leads. I decided not to tell her about Cindy being Adam's ex-wife because she didn't need more information put into her head. It was too crowded already. She was a bit reluctant. "I'm heading over to Ever After and going to check out all of them. If I find out anything I don't already know, I'll come see you." I gave her the crisscross over my heart. "Fine." She sucked in a deep breath. "I'll walk with you." When we got to the bottom of the hill and stood on the sidewalk, there was a hint of color popping over the woods. The clinking of chains echoed from far off. When I turned to look, I could see the faint glow of Eloise's lantern lighting the way down the main street past the Gathering Grove tea shop. I headed straight across the street while Petunia and Mr. Prince Charming took a right toward the pet shop. I shook my head. Mr. Prince Charming knew Petunia was about to do her morning ritual where she talked to all the animals, brushed them, gave them treats, and then fed them. He was included. Ever After books. I read the purple lettering on the khaki-colored canvas that hung over the bookstore. The sign wasn't turned to open, but the lights were on. I headed through the gate and up the steps. I knocked lightly on the door. I leaned over to look into the window so Ophelia could see it was me. Ophelia was wearing a pair of jeans with a white, tight-fitting sweater and black wedge sandals, which made her 5'5" frame appear to be a little taller. Her honey blonde hair tumbled down her back in beautiful, loose curls. She didn't look like a mortal would think a witch would look like. She smiled like a movie star. "June, it's early." She looked at my hands. "Colton told me what happened. I just put on some coffee. Get in here." When I stepped in, I had to duck from the flying book. It's early and they're all getting their energy out before the day starts. It was her way of warning me to keep an eye out or I'd lose one. The books swirled, dipped, and dove throughout the colorful shop. The wings of the books resembled the petals on the daisies in the flower bed outside the shop. There was a lamppost at the beginning of each aisle. All the aisles were filled with books. In each corner of the store were big, comfy couches with large, fluffy pillows and baskets of snuggly blankets in all sorts of bright colors. Her shop was always busy, especially with little children. "Come on back to my office and let's chat." I followed her to the back of the shop and through a door that opened up into Ophelia's office space, which wasn't much different than the actual shop. There were floor-to-ceiling shelves filled with books and a long black desk in the middle of the room. There was a coffee pot stand that let off steam from the freshly brewed pot. The comfort of the warm beans swirled around the room, making me feel a little more alive. "What can I do for you?" she asked, and handed me a mug to help myself. "I wanted to know if you can help me do some research on the Audubon Society members. One of them is the killer, and I think I'd like to start with his ex-wife, Cindy Sams." I lifted the mug to my lips to take a sip. "Ex-wife?" she asked with some hesitation. "Yeah, I had Madame Torres on around the campfire last night so she could hear different conversations, and she picked up one where Adam admitted to her being his ex. That puts a whole different light on who did it and the motive." Ophelia doctored up her coffee with creamer and sugar, then headed over to her desk, where she sat down at the desktop computer. "Cindy Sams," she typed on the keyboard. Her eyes focused on the monitor. She kissed the tip of her finger and placed it on the screen. I was sure it was some sort of witch thing, but I didn't ask. I just wanted the answers. "According to my sources," she said, and turned the monitor toward me, "Cindy Sams has been divorced from Adam Vetters for over 10 years. They met at an exotic zoo convention when she was there to see the spangled smoky momoko." "That's the bird," I noted, making this the second most important motive for her. "First off, Adam was her ex, which most women want to kill their ex without a motive, but now we do have a tie to how they met, over their love for the spangled smoky momoko. Over the past 10 years, she spent her days working for different organizations to help endangered species, which is really nice." Ophelia rotated the monitor back to her. "It might be nice, but she has still got a motive." I took a few more sips of my coffee. "She glared at him since he showed up here. She even wanted to continue to move forward with the 3 a.m. search last night." "That's terrible. Ophelia shook her hands in the air like she was shrugging off anything left over from her search for Cindy. Next name? Webster Jones. I continued to talk about him while she typed and did her finger-kissing thing. He is a professional photographer who traveled the world. When he went on a bird expedition job, he had a hard time getting used to the slow, zen art of bird watching, but ended up loving it by the end. That's when he decided to quit his job at the National Geographic and go out on his own with the Audubon Society. That's a half-truth. Ophelia looked over the top of the monitor at me with a raised brow. According to my sources, Mr. Jones was at the National Geographic magazine until a few years ago when he was in Madagascar, where he had an altercation with another person on the expedition. She turned the monitor again. Is this Adam Vedder that was murdered? Her fingernail tapped the photo on her screen, because my source said this man's name is Adam Vedder. It is. Shock spread all over me. My mouth dried. I blinked a few times to make sure, but it was Adam. He lied to me. Who? Adam or Webster? She asked. Webster? I gnawed on my lip. I was so sure Cindy did it. She might have, but now there seems to be two people that have motive to kill him. Her words made me wonder what the other two were hiding. Let's see if any of the others have a background with our victim. I eased back into the chair and took a long drink of the hot coffee. Paris Rush. Ophelia continued to type. She's the one who recognized the spangled in the shop, I reminded myself. I'm not sure what would link her to Adam other than their love for the spangled. She did tear up when Oscar told them about Adam's death. There's not much about her. She's been a member of the society for years. She's twice divorced and does odd jobs to pay bills. She cleans houses and does some part-time waitressing. While Ophelia continued to read about Paris, I drank my coffee. She's pretty low-key. I don't think she's the killer. She's very enthusiastic. That's about it. I decided I wasn't going to put her on the top of the list. What about Tammy Harp? Tammy. Ophelia did her thing. I got up and refilled my coffee mug. I took the carafe over to refill Ophelia's mug. Not much here either. She looked at me and made a frown face. She's been in retail most of her life, but she has Instagram. Let's check that. Ophelia grabbed her phone and used her finger to bring up the Instagram app. Do you have Instagram? She asked. I shook my head. You should get it for the shop. It's a great way to take photos, and you don't have to worry about all those status updates. You do hashtags to get people to look at your photos. I like to use hashtag children books, hashtag bookstore, hashtag small town. I've gotten a lot of new customers who never knew about Whispering Falls. Really? My mind drifted to the different hashtags I could use for the shop. I might have to give it a try. Here. She handed me her phone. Here is Tammy Harp's Instagram. Use your finger and scroll through her photos. See if anything jumps out. Give me your phone, and we can set you up under your shop name. They have business accounts. She put her empty hand out in front of me. I pulled my phone from my crossbody and gave it to her. Ophelia was great at connecting to customers. I was too, but I could probably get better and use more social media since it didn't seem to be going away as I wished it would. Tammy's posts that were dated from the past couple of weeks were pictures of some of the Audubon Society meetings. There were a couple of Cindy Sams smiling. That was refreshing. It looks like she's been really involved with the society, I said, and continued to scroll down. Let's see what she did before the society. There were some photos of her out to dinner, and another where she was on the beach. A few more of her in a grocery store where she seemed to be a cashier, but nothing that screamed killer or that said she was tied to Adam Vedder in any way. She looks like Paris, not much out there. Ophelia looked up from my phone. I'm sorry, but I think you can dig deeper into why Adam had a hand in Webster's firing at the magazine. I'd definitely look into Adam and Cindy's divorce. There might be some money thing there. Yeah, I still didn't have a good feeling about anyone in the group. Thank you so much for your help. I set Ophelia's phone down on her desk in exchange for my phone. You're all set up. I put a few of the photos from my phone I took in your shop on there to get you started. Now go take some good photos of your amazing potion bottles and hashtag those suckers. She winked. Chapter 13. Eloise was long gone by the time Ophelia and I finished looking up the 4 members of the Audubon Society to see which one had the most motive to kill Adam Vedder. Though Cindy Sams was Adam's ex-wife and Adam Vedder caused Webster Jones to get fired from his job, were they really capable of killing? My soul was still unsettled, and I guessed it would have to be something for Oscar to determine if there was evidence from the crime scene that tied any of them to the murder. The police station was down the street from Ever After Books and before Glory Bee Pet Shop. It was still too early to go open the shop, plus I was itching to see if Oscar was at work and tell him what Ophelia and I had discovered. I opened the door to find Oscar sitting at his desk. The inside of the station was a typical cop shop. The desks were in the front and the cell was in the back. "You never came to bed." He looked up before he got up to kiss me. "Good morning." "Good morning." I felt so at home in his arms. I wished I could stay there forever. "I have some news." "Of course you do." He smiled and gestured for me to sit. "What is it?" "Well, Cindy Sams was married to Adam Vedder, though they've been divorced for over 10 years. My words made him become suddenly wide-eyed. Webster Jones told me he'd left his job at the National Geographic to pursue a more zen bird photographer gig. When I sucked in a deeper breath because I really thought this was a much better motive to have killed Adam and possibly made Webster our killer. Adam and he had some sort of argument and the magazine fired him. "Must have been some sort of argument." Oscar leaned back and tented his fingertips in front of him as though he were contemplating what I'd told him. Paris and Tammy don't appear to have any sort of motive, but it's still good to look into them. It was merely a suggestion. "Thank you for letting me do my job." He grinned, but shifted his eyes over my shoulder when the door opened and the Karima sisters shuffled in. "Morning, Sheriff." Constance Karima greeted Oscar, but didn't even pay me a bit of attention. "Sheriff," Patience was quick to repeat. "Hi, ladies." I made myself known. Constance ho-hummed between her tight lips. "Adam Vedder died from an allergic reaction to bee stings. The blow to the head was what knocked him out, but the bees got him after. He laid there a few minutes before he finally stopped breathing. The time of death would probably be a few minutes before midnight." Constance pinched Patience. "Ouch!" Patience jumped. "Give him the folder." Constance jerked her finger toward Oscar. "Folder." Patience opened her house dress coat and pulled out the autopsy folder with Adam Vedder's name on it. "Now these are preliminary." She made sure she reminded him of how she did a quick autopsy before they really dug into him. Oscar took the file and opened it. His eyes scanned down the first page, then he flipped it and continued until he got to the last page. He went back to the second page. "It says here he had granola in his stomach." He looked up at the sisters. "What does that mean?" Constance asked. "He was hungry, that's what," Patience joked, but no one found it funny. She looked down at her feet and fiddled with her fingers. "The stomach is my part. The entire digestive system, including the esophagus. Is there something you see wrong?" Poor Patience. She truly never got out of her sister's shadow and always seemed so timid. If we didn't have rule number 1 where we were forbidden to read other spiritualists, I'd have already given her a confidence potion. "No beef stew?" I looked at her. "Beef stew? Heavens no." Patience shook her head. "There was no evidence in any of his blood work that even led to eating any sort of meat. He was a vegetarian." Vegetarian? I searched my mind for anything last night that told me he didn't eat the stew. I clearly remembered him having a bowl in his hand. But was it stew? Oscar closed up the file and got up. "Thanks, sisters." He nodded at them. "Let's go, June. It's time to get those statements." Oscar ran ahead of me on the path that ran between the police station and Glory Bee, which led straight to the Full Moon Resort. "Are there any other vegetarians in the group?" he asked me over his shoulder as we were practically running. "I don't know." I tried to keep up with him, but he was fast. "Why are you going so fast?" "I don't have much time. I can't keep them in Whispering Falls forever." He stopped once we came to the clearing where the massive main part of the resort came into vision. "If I can't get this solved before tonight, they can leave. Then I'm going to have to call in outside help, and we don't want to do that." "Maybe there's evidence we've overlooked." I followed him up the steps of the resort. "Colton has been out there for an hour or so. I'm hoping he'll bring something, anything back." His chest lifted as he took a deep breath and let out a long sigh before he opened the door and held it for me to enter the resort. "I sent off Adam's cane to the lab, and I'm hoping they'll get it back to me soon. Prince? I wondered exactly what he was looking for, beside the fact the blood on the bird's gold beak was definitely from Adam.
There weren't any visible to the naked eye, so I'm using the wizard police lab.
He closed the door behind us. Maybe we can get someone to confess. I knew it was grasping at straws to think one of these Audubon Society members would actually tell us they killed Adam, but a gal could hope.
June.
Oscar laughed and shook his head. The sound of silverware and the low murmur of voices spilled out of the dining room and got louder as we made our way around the big fireplace to find the group eating around the large countertop. Amethyst stood behind it while still preparing more food. Good morning. She grabbed a mitten and took some biscuits out of the oven. I'm having some biscuits and chocolate to go with the grits and eggs this morning. How many do you want? She asked me and Oscar.
I'm good. I'm actually here on police business.
Oscar looked at the group. They'd put their forks down. Do you know who killed Adam? Tammy asked. She and Paris were sitting next to each other. They gripped hands. I just want to go home. Paris's upper lip quivered. You can't keep us here much longer, Cindy said in a flat voice. I want my camera back before anything happens to it. Webster reached across the counter and took another biscuit from the basket. He tore it in half and sopped up the rest of the chocolate sauce on his plate.
I wanted to grab some statements from everyone. Then we can see where we go from here.
Oscar pulled out his notebook and flipped open the page.
Cindy Sams, can I see you over there?
Sure. She let out a long sigh and took one drink of her coffee. You can take my plate. I'm finished. She got off the bar stool and placed her napkin on the counter. I've suddenly lost my appetite. If you get hungry, I'm always more than happy to fix you something. Amethyst was such a good hostess. June, can I get you a cup of coffee? That'd be great. I pointed over to the couch where Oscar was taking Cindy. I'll bring it over. Amethyst winked. Do you also mind cleaning all of their rooms tonight before they leave? I gave her a sideways look, indicating I didn't clean for her, but there was something she needed me to know. If it was that urgent, she'd have told me, but this seemed like something that could wait. I've not slept good. I dreamt all night. Her words were just confirmation of how her gift had come to her in her dream, and there was some details I needed to know that must have pertained to Adam. Slowly, I raised my chin up and then down to show her I understood exactly what she was saying. By the time I'd made it over to the couch, Oscar had already had Cindy state her name and occupation.
Tell me, how did you know the victim? Oscar asked her.
I'm sure you've already found out that we were once married. A flash of wild grief across her face made my heart ache. There was some deep-rooted feelings there that I was sure needed to be explored. Amethyst came over to give me the cup of coffee. I mouthed thank you so as not to interrupt Oscar's questioning.
Yes.
Oscar seemed to be happy she'd offered the information without him having to pull it out of her.
Can you tell me why you divorced?
It's no secret. I'd spent my life trying to help endangered species, and when I was on the board of an organization, we did a lot of fundraisers for exotic zoos. As she spoke, I started to feel a heaviness that centered in her chest. I took a few quick, small breaths that caught Oscar's attention. He knew how my intuition punched me in the gut sometimes, which led me to revelations about the customers I served. Not that Cindy was a customer, but she was a mortal, and it wasn't like I could turn my gift on and off. We held each other's stare for a second, and he knew to continue with the questioning.
Go on.
He encouraged her to tell her story. Adam owned one of the exotic zoos in attendance at the fundraiser. He was so into the spangled, smoky Momoko like I was. The bird had yet to be extinct, but it was on the list to watch. There was a smile on her face as she remembered the tender moments in which they met. He was into making exhibits that encouraged reproduction of species so they didn't become extinct. It was his heart for the animals that made me fall in love with him.
Do you have children with Adam?
Oscar asked her a great question. Was there an alimony thing? A custody issue? No, neither of us have children. She shook her head. Our babies were our animals we strive to take care of.
How did the divorce end?
He asked the dreaded question that could lead to a motive. He got bit by the money bug. The more money that poured into the zoo, the greedier he got. He really wanted to be the best exotic zoo and began to run over anyone who didn't donate huge amounts of dollars. Her nostrils flared with fury. Her features hardened. Hatred had taken over the pain in her chest, making me gasp.
Are you okay?
Oscar looked at me. I'm fine. Heartburn. I lifted my hand to my chest, though Oscar knew better. I'm sorry. I apologized for the interruption. You were saying about the fundraising. Yes. He didn't want to travel anymore, which is a big part of trying to save endangered species. He wanted people to bring him the animals and the money, or he didn't give you the time of day. He spat out contemptuously. We drifted apart, since we couldn't see eye to eye anymore. We fought all the time. I really began to hate who he was turning out to be, but not enough to kill him. Oscar rolled his shoulders back. Tell me about the Audubon Society, how you travel. Oscar moved the questioning into a different direction. We use the summer months to travel around different places in the United States. There's over 500 chapters in the States, and sometimes we pair up with them to make our numbers bigger when we are going to find a particular bird. We all work together. Some get more accolades than others when we do find something like the spangled. Her shoulders relaxed, and there was a faint smile on her lips. She definitely enjoyed talking about the society, clearly her passion. We are a nonprofit environmental organization dedicated to conservation. The Audubon started in 1905, making it one of the oldest of such organizations in the world. We rely on science and education of the species, along with a grassroots movement to help our mission to conservation. Who decides when and where you go on these trips? Oscar asked. I coordinate those. How did you hear about the spangled? I asked. Another member from a different Audubon Society had mentioned at the last conference how he and his wife had come to Whispering Falls for a day trip. He swore he saw the spangled. Of course, everyone dismissed him. When we discussed it at our last meeting, Paris suggested we come and look for ourselves, she said. The spangled is most active in the summer months. Since it was summer and we didn't have anything planned for this particular month, we made a quick decision, and the 4 of us were the only ones from our chapter who could come. Adam. Is he a member? Oscar asked. No. Her tongue was sharp. How do you think he found out you were here? I asked her. I have no idea. She glanced off into the distance while shaking her head. He knows so many people. Anyone at the conference could have told him, or anyone from my chapter. I don't know. Her voice trailed off. Did you speak to him or visit his teepee while at the campsite? Oscar was getting to the biggest question of this interrogation. No and no. He disgusts me. I know better than to talk to him because it will do nothing but make me angry, and that does no good for the team. She lifted her chin in confidence. Now when can we leave? I'll let you know. But for now I'm finished with questioning you. When she stood up to leave, Oscar said, I might have some questions later today. Cindy didn't bother looking at us. I'm going to go to the shops if anyone wants to join me, she told the group when she walked back over to them. I will. Tammy spoke up. Tammy Harp? Oscar read off his notes, getting her attention. I'd like to talk to you before you go with Cindy. Do you mind waiting a few minutes? Tammy asked Cindy and got off the stool. Cindy slid her eyes over to Oscar and back to Tammy, shaking her head. I'll be outside on the deck. Cindy stomped off. Paris and Webster scooted next to each other. Their heads were together, and they whispered between them. Oscar and I gave each other a look. I was sure Oscar would ask them what they were discussing. How can I help? Tammy sat down on the couch which Cindy had previously occupied. I already knew pretty much about Tammy since Ophelia and I had looked her up. State your name and occupation and how long you've been a member of the Audubon Society. Oscar had his pen and paper ready. I'm Tammy Harp. I'm 50 years... She blushed. Oh dear, you didn't ask my age. No, Oscar laughed, but it's fine. Okay. I'm 50, and I've been in retail all my life. I didn't go to college. I joined the society a few weeks ago. Her shoulders bounced up and down. She was full of energy for sure. Why did you join the society? I asked, since she didn't seem like the outdoor type. Like I said, I'm 50, and friends are limited. I was looking around on Instagram using the hashtag groups when I found the society. Not this particular one, because Cindy is definitely not hip to social media, which really is a shame, because I tried to tell her there could be more people joining, and when that happens, the society gets more money from dues, and we can go all sorts of places. She held up a finger, which is why I joined. Trips. I figured why not join and 1, get friends, and 2, travel a few weekends a year. There were clearly different reasons people joined any group, and Tammy was specifically there because she wanted to connect with others. Did you go to the last convention? Oscar asked. No. She drew out the word and slowly shook her head. I think it was out of state, and I don't have a lot of disposable cash. Plus, I wasn't able to get off work.
I thought you said you were between jobs. Oscar looked back at his notes.
I am. Then I wasn't. She didn't seem too bothered about not having a job.
Did you know Adam Vedder? He asked her while I watched her body language. Her chest gave a couple of quick inhales before her eyes teared.
No, she gulped. Well, not until here. He was a lovely man. He really does care about the Spangled, and he said his zoo was building this big exhibition. He even had this elaborate plan he printed out.
You seem upset for someone who didn't know him. I made the observation.
The man is dead. She looked at me with a gapped mouth. Who deserves that? It's awful.
Did you talk to Adam at the camp? Oscar took over the conversation again.
I did. He was very knowledgeable about the endangered animals. I told him he should come talk to our group or host us at his zoo. I guess that's not going to happen.
Her voice trailed off.
Along with the job offer, she muttered.
Job offer?
I told him I was between jobs, and he said I should come work for him since they were building on a big addition. They were going to be hiring.
She blinked a few times and looked down.
Is there anything you want to add, or did you hear anything that we need to know? Oscar asked.
No, but if I do remember anything, I'll let you know. Is that all? She smacked her hands on her thighs.
Yes, but like I'm telling everyone, don't leave Whispering Falls until I tell you. I might have a few more questions.
He turned the page in his notebook.
No problem. I'm going to explore all those great shops today.
She put a big smile on her face and got up. She waved at Paris and Webster on her way out.
Which one?
Webster twirled around on his stool and asked Oscar.
You're good.
Oscar waved him over. I guess I'll have another cup of coffee, Paris told Amethyst. Amethyst cleaned the dishes in the sink and continued to chit-chat with Paris while Webster took his seat on the interrogation couch. Oscar's remarks were much more like general statements, so he could look back at them and then decide on more specific questions. It was his process, and I didn't bother trying to make suggestions or to change it. He knew what he was doing.
Name and occupation.
Oscar wasn't as gentle on Webster.
Webster Jones, photographer,
he stated flatly, giving us a put-out attitude.
How long have you been a member of the Audubon Society?
Oscar asked, not one bit flustered by how Webster was acting.
I've been with this chapter for about 8 years. Others over the years. My job had given me the opportunity to travel. I still pay dues for various locations because I like to go on some of their trips like this one. He rolled his eyes, which turned out to suck.
How did you know Adam Vedder?
Oscar ignored Webster's observation about his time here in Whispering Falls.
He's been on some of the trips I've been on.
He leaned back and crossed his legs and arms. Like the one in Madagascar? I asked, because I couldn't sit there and watch him be so smug.
It appears you did your homework.
The corner of his lip twitched. There was laughter in his eyes.
Yeah, he's a pretty big jerk. Was a big jerk.
Is it true it's because of him that you lost your job at the National Geographic magazine?
Oscar had used the knowledge I'd found out with Ophelia Biblio's help to question Webster.
It's true he's a first-rate jerk,
Webster spat. He gnawed on his cheek, drew his arms long across the back of the couch.
Yeah, he's the reason. He sucked in a deep breath. I'm a big game hunter. We'd gone on the same expedition years ago to Madagascar, where they were taking us to see the mating spangled smoky momogos. National Geographic had a big monetary reward to anyone who could produce the photos. I needed the money to live on, and he needed the money to fund his zoo exhibit.
What does this have to do with big game hunting? I asked, instantly not liking that he did this.
I can see by your expression you don't like the idea that I might be on the lookout for a trophy like a giraffe.
His words made my skin crawl.
That's the look I get from everyone who knows or finds out. It just so happens Adam paid someone to get a photo of me killing.
I don't want to know what you killed. I stopped him and put my hand up. Just tell me what Adam did to you.
Fine.
He glared at me.
National Geographic is obviously against big game hunting, as are most of the environmental magazines. He got the photo during our trip to Madagascar and sent it to all the magazines I worked for, including my main source of income and why I was there, National Geographic. They immediately had me removed from the group and sent home. When I got home, they called me into a meeting and fired me on the spot. They let me know exactly who sent the photo.
So the big tale about you getting all zen was a complete lie? I was actually a little hurt because I wanted so bad to believe he was a nice guy.
Not a total lie. I did have to learn to be zen. That's why I forgave Adam.
He dragged his arms off the back of the couch and folded his hands in his lap.
Did you ever confront Adam about what he did to you? Oscar asked.
Of course I did. As soon as he got back, he scoffed. I beat the son of a...
He slurred his words together, cursing Adam up one way and down the next.
Then a couple of years later, I went back and apologized because I realized he'd done me a favor. I actually started to love photography again and not view it as a job once I got back into nature and found myself again.
That's why you killed Adam? To get back at him?
Oscar was bold.
Don't be ridiculous, man. I didn't kill him.
Webster smiled.
I might have the motive, but I wouldn't waste my energy on someone like him.
What does that mean? Oscar asked.
He only cared about money. He lost his love of the endangered species when he started getting big donors and wanted to grow that zoo, he snarled. After I realized who I really was, I stopped big game hunting, and half of my income is now donated to the various organizations dedicated to banning trophy hunting.
That'd be easy to check out.
Oscar continued to write.
My lawyer said you had to let us go in 24 hours.
Webster had contacted his lawyer. That hit me in the gut.
I'll let you know when you can leave.
Oscar was having a hard time keeping on his game face.
Stay around, and I might have some more questions later.
Webster pushed himself up to stand.
I didn't kill him.
He stalked off. Oscar and I looked at each other, the look that made us both pause. I guess it's my turn now. Paris walked over. I'd like to go shopping too, so please hurry.
Great.
Oscar was losing his patience when it came to people telling him to hurry up. Didn't these people know this was a murder investigation?
State your name and how long you've been at the Audubon Society.
I'm Paris Rush. I've been there for a really long time, like 10 years. She shrugged and sat down on the edge of the couch, her hands in prayer position between her knees.
Did you know Adam and Cindy when they were married? Oscar asked her.
No, I had no idea they were even married or divorced until he said something at the camp. She was forthcoming with the information that Madame Torres had showed me. Why did you decide to come to Whispering Falls? I asked her. The Spangled, of course. Plus, the National Audubon Society gives money for big finds. I was hoping I'd hit the jackpot. But I'm bummed Adam was killed because he offered me money to let him know if I saw the bird again or even got a photo. That right there told me she was off the hook. She was as honest as the day was long, and nothing in my gut told me Paris Rush was the killer, though my gut had misled me before. Rarely, but it had. Chapter 14.
The victim decides he's going to look for the bird on his own. He did this because he didn't get a good response from anyone else in the camp. He had an argument with someone before he left. Who was that someone?
Oscar asked on our way out of the resort. Paris? I asked. She did say Adam had offered. What if he didn't like taking no for an answer, and it was her that I saw him arguing with before he was murdered?
That's a good theory. I want to get back to the station and get a look at Webster's camera, and all the others' cameras, but he was very worried about me having it.
Oscar made a good point. Webster could have changed over the last years, but sometimes old wounds can be reopened. Even the zenest of people crack. We stopped at the fork in the path.
Why did you stop?
Oscar asked. I'm going to go see Eloise. I want to see if she saw anything in her morning ritual, or if she remembered anything about finding Adam. I hugged him. Plus, she gives me comfort like a mama, and I need that right now.
She loves you like she's your mom.
Oscar and I were lucky to have his aunt. She was amazing.
I'll let you know what I find in all the photos.
We kissed each other goodbye.
Wow!
Mr. Prince Charming jumped out of nowhere and knocked my bracelet with his paw.
He still can't stand it when I kiss you.
Oscar gave the ornery cat a look of disapproval. Now, boys, I joked and shook a finger at each of them. I looked at Mr. Prince Charming. You knew I was going to Eloise's and decided to join me. I swear he smiled before he darted off down the opposite path Oscar took to head back to the village.
Eloise, I trilled through the couple of trees where her 2-story house was built off the ground on a platform. It was a gorgeous house that had wooden steps leading up to a cozy wraparound porch. Darla loved it here. Every time I came to visit, I could feel Darla's presence, and it comforted me. Eloise, though a Darksider who once had been banned from the village, had to live on the outskirts of town. She wanted to keep an eye on her family, and that included Oscar when he was little. Darla had me, and since she was an outsider like Eloise, they bonded. Little did I realize a dose of Darla did have some magic to the potions, because Darla would give them to Eloise, who put the magic right on in. They were best friends. I cherished that in Eloise, and how her loyalty to Darla was still apparent by her relationship with me. I walked around the side of the house, where I had a hunch I might find Eloise. Lanterns hung from the trees that dotted along the gravel pathway. I kind of longed for it to be nightfall, since it was so pretty here during the dark hours. Beautiful flowers were planted on both sides of the walkway. I couldn't resist running my hand along the vibrant purple, green, red, orange, and yellow flowers. Wisteria vines provided a canopy and shielded the early morning sun to a clearing. It reminded me of the beautiful vine that covered the overhang of the front of a dose of Darla, because it was in fact from this vine it came from and lived on. Over here, Eloise called from the rows and rows of herbs that were neatly planted and proportioned perfectly. Mr. Prince Charming's tail waved above the rows as he darted in and out of the herbs. In the moonflower row, each row had a painted wood sign with the names of the herbs that followed in line. Herbs I had never heard of. I walked in front of each row, touching each herb sign and smiling, recalling the first time I'd ever come to this magical place. Rose petals, moonflower, mandrake root, seaweed, shrinking violet, dream dust, fairy dust, magic peanut, lucky clover, steel rose, I whispered, spooky shroom. I heard you were coming. Eloise popped up. Her short red hair glistened from the ray of sunshine peeking through the garden. I'm just picking some moonflower. It snaps off the vine much better with a little love of the sun to warm the stem. She held the magenta and white petaled stem in the air. She stood up, and with her arms straight out and her head tilted back, she inhaled deeply and slowly exhaled. You need a hug. I sure do. I wasn't going to give up a free one. We embraced, and my heart lost the heaviness from talking to all the Audubon Society members about Adam's death. Are you ready to eat? She gestured toward the opposite end of the garden, to a gazebo with twinkling lights twisted around the wooden spindles. In the center was a table covered in a hot pink cloth, and a place setting for two with her rose-petal china. I love how you know when I'm coming to visit. Tension completely fell from my shoulders. It's my gift. Eloise glanced over her shoulder and laughed. There was a spark in her eye. She threw the moonflower into a simmering pot and stirred it before she walked over to the gazebo, where I'd already picked up a ding-dong and started to nibble at it. I sat on the rickety chair and finished my favorite treat. The assortment of scones, fruits, and quiches, along with the ding-dongs, made my mouth water. She poured us a cup of coffee. It seems as if you've had a full morning, and the day has yet to begin. She was referring to the shop opening. There's so much to help Oscar with before the 24-hour hold is up with the Audubon Society members that I've taken it on myself to help him. I took a sip of coffee, and it tasted so good. The coffee I'd had at the Tresort didn't relax me like having coffee with Eloise. We talked to all the members about Adam, and each one could have technically killed him and had mortal motive, but nothing sent my intuition flying off the shelf. I could hear my own frustration in my tone. I hate it for Oscar because he's running against the clock. He knew this was part of the wizard police job when he took it, she reminded me. He always has a time frame on crimes before the mortal police get contacted. I know, but he seems to be really bothered with this one. I've never seen him interview everyone in a case, and this time he's really taking his time to listen and write their statements down, besides recording it on the wand. Most of the time, Oscar knew the wand was taping his conversations and would play those back, but when he wrote things down, they stuck in his head. Each criminal case Oscar had was put with a time restraint. If the crime was against a spiritualist, the time frame was longer, But with mortals, it was different. You have to let your protectors lead the way. She glanced down at Mr. Prince Charming, who had curled up in a ray of sunlight on one of the gazebo steps to catch some Z's. Someone has been on the prowl. They still don't get along after all these years, I groaned and helped myself to a scone. And you are wondering if I had any more news. It was as though she could read my mind. I do not. I saw the crow. I knew it was odd, and that's when I followed it. My immediate hunch was he'd been there for a while, since he had already passed beyond before I got there. To my understanding, he's come back in the form of the Spangled, but seeking asylum here. Your understanding? I asked, wanting her to clarify the position she'd put herself in. Let's just say these woods are a good cover for many creatures who don't want to be found. A smile curled on the corner of her lips. Until the proper lifelong aliases are to be seen, Adam— She hesitated, licked her lips. Carefully choosing her words, she continued, The Spangled Smoky Momoko will remain in seclusion until that time is present to it. Petunia reported the Spangled missing. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw a suitcase by one of her garden benches. You're telling me the bird is fine? I knew she wasn't allowed to tell me the particulars, but if she could report the bird was safe and out of harm's way, that would make me feel so much better. I am reporting the bird is fine. She shifted her eyes to where mine had led. Her body turned in her chair, and she pointed to the suitcase. Yes, I'm going to take a quick trip somewhere, but that's not here nor there. You can't tell me where you're going, can you? So many strange things were happening here that I couldn't put my finger on them. June, please don't try to read me. Eloise was putting me in my place as a mother would a child. Trust in your gifts. Then that means I need to leave, so I can get this solved in the next 12 hours. I stood up, and she did too. Please be careful. You know I will. There was a slight tension in her arms when she hugged me. She ran her hand down my arm and stopped at my wrist. She used her fingertips to look at each charm until she got to the newest one. The meeting that took place in the teepee was the meeting. Before I could even respond, Eloise had snapped her fingers and disappeared, along with the suitcase. Chapter 15. Eloise had something up her sleeve. It was something she didn't want me to know about, and I had to trust she knew what she was doing. She'd never failed us yet, and when it came to Oscar, she always put everything aside in order to make sure he got what he needed. Right now, he needed time. It was not on our side. "Where are you going?" I asked Mr. Prince Charming when he darted down the path in the complete opposite direction we needed to take to get back to town. I stood there watching and wondering what it was that he needed me to see. "Why?" I threw my hands in the air. "Why are you doing this to me?" I asked him, knowing it was almost time to open the shop. Deep down, I couldn't help but wonder if the Audubon Society members who had decided to go shopping for the day would even set foot in my shop. It was so tempting to read them. I was looking forward to it. All the distractions of the Tresort during Oscar's questioning them really messed with my intuition. When they were in my shop, that was a different story. I would be able to truthfully get to their souls and see where they really stood with Adam Vedder. I reached down into my bag and grabbed my phone. My phone chirped a text. It was Faith. She beat me to texting her to see if she could open the shop for me since I was going to be late. "The wind told me you were busy, and I'm on my way to the shop. Take your time," she texted. I laughed and looked around me, secretly thanking the wind. I slipped the phone in my back pocket. Leftover branches from a few months ago when it was winter and fall were nice and dry, so they crunched under my shoes when I stepped on them along the trail. The trail was covered with old pine needles and dried leaves, telling me this was a path not traveled too much. Mr. Prince Charming was around the bend and sitting on an old tree stump as though he was waiting for me. His tail was swinging as he batted at the buzzing flies in the air until I caught up to him. "Okay, I'm all yours." I scratched the top of his head. His eyes closed for a moment, and then he jumped down, trotting in front of me. This time he didn't run ahead. This is familiar. I looked around when I noticed we were coming to the campsite. "What do you have me coming back here for?" I asked. The rustling of leaves from the other side of one of the teepees alerted me. I was not alone. Suddenly, Oscar darted out from the teepee and ran down the path we'd taken to find Adam. "Oscar!" I yelled after him, stopping him in mid-run. He turned around, heaved a big breath, and smiled.
"Good, you're here."
He walked back, sweat beaded along his thick brows. "You two?" I gestured between them, knowing Mr. Prince Charming led me here. "You two talked?" I asked, shocked since they weren't the best buddies.
"I had Aunt Eloise tell him to lead you here. She said you'd stopped by and apologized for leaving abruptly."
He leaned in and kissed my cheek. "Do you know where she was going?" I asked. "She had a suitcase," I followed up. "And I think she's got the spangled smoky momoko, which is really Adam."
"She said that she thinks she can help out the species, but not really help out in the case." He shrugged. The corner of his lips dipped down. "I didn't feel like questioning her about it since my mind is filled with this."
"This?" I asked, glancing to the path.
"I looked at all the cameras. It appears you were right about a fight. I'm not sure who, but Webster's camera was set up outside of his teepee. He videoed himself at the beginning of it and said into the camera how he didn't trust anyone in the camp not to go ahead and look, so he wanted to set up a video to see if anyone would be dishonest."
He pointed to where the camera was set up.
"It had a good view of Adam's teepee."
I followed Oscar over to where he believed Adam to have taken his last few moments.
"In the video, Adam leaves his teepee. He's without his walking stick."
Oscar looked at me with a raised brow.
"The camera was set on a special night vision lens for bird watching. He had set up a 400mm camera lens with autofocus. The camera picked up Adam, but not the person who took off after him. The sound was off."
"That's odd." I wondered why Webster would turn off the sound. "Do you think he set up the camera as a premeditative murder plot?"
"Did he eat the stew?"
Oscar asked a really good question. "I'm not sure who ate what at this point." I gnawed on my bottom lip. "I was for sure Adam ate it. He had a bowl and he was eating. Petunia had nothing else to offer."
"The sisters gave a 15-minute spread for the time of death. The path we found him on is a path not traveled. To me, I couldn't help but wonder how someone followed him out there, knocked him in the head hard enough for him to get the aneurysm to bleed out and die before the midnight hour, and got back in time for you to find him, and without you hearing anything."
Oscar was rambling to me. "I'm not following what you're saying." My phone chirped, and I pulled it out of my pocket.
"Everything okay?"
he asked. "Yeah," I shook my head. "Instagram notification." I put the phone back in my pocket. Ophelia swears I need to be on there for the shop, so she started me one. Now I'm getting these notifications when someone follows me or likes a photo she put up. I waved it off. "Back to what you were trying to tell me." I put my hands on my hips and looked around. All the bowls from the campfire supper Petunia had prepared were still stacked up in one another near the charred fire.
"I'm saying someone had to have walked down the trail before he was killed. What if the person told Adam they saw the bird down that trail? It's just far enough away that no one would hear them. Adam took off and the killer let him get just enough distance down the trail before they followed. In the video, someone followed Adam, but they weren't in the full view, giving the killer a shadow. I couldn't make out who it was."
Oscar's face clouded.
"I just think this was premeditated, like you said, but the person knew that trail. Whoever goes down that trail, like Eloise said, it's the bee trail, where all the hives are. Was the killer bit?"
"Did the killer somehow know this was where the bees were?" I questioned.
"June, did Petunia eat the stew?"
Oscar looked at me with a deep sadness in his eyes. "No," I shook my head. "Not Petunia." I honestly couldn't wrap my head around the idea that Oscar would even think Petunia could do this.
"June, she knows this forest. She knows these animals. She can get bees to do whatever she wanted. If she thought the spangled smoky momoko was in danger from any of these people, you and I both know Petunia would do whatever to keep the animals safe."
Oscar was all about the motive, and it was true, but murder?
"Think about it. She didn't eat the stew because you and she had planned for them to nap at midnight so the meeting wouldn't take place. What if she went to Adam's teepee to discredit Paris's story, like the two of you have been doing, and when he wasn't buying it, she told him the bird was down the path. She gave the bees enough warning to let them have him pass. You said he mentioned he was allergic to bees. She overheard, and that's the murder weapon."
Oh, Oscar. I gasped and put my hand over my mouth. Petunia did sit up a little more and seemed more interested in what Adam had to say when he told the group around the campfire how he was allergic to bees and wanted them to help him look out for them.
He told the group?
Oscar knew this was going to solidify how someone knew. He did. "Deadly," he said. I whispered, as the words were too painful to say loudly. "I just can't even—"
"June, none of us want to think our own kind would do something like this. But think about it." He put his arm around me. "Who would have enough time to get him down the trail, hit him over the head, bees swarm him but not the killer, and the killer get back here? It's hard enough to walk that trail and know it, much less not know it."
"But Petunia?" I questioned again.
"There's only one way to find out."
The look in his eyes frightened me. "No." I refused to even try to think about it.
"June." Oscar's voice took on a tone of reasoning. "What if your shop was on the line? What if our marriage was on the line? You'd do whatever you had to do to make sure we were safe here in the village. That's a person's soul she's dealing with. It's her job to use her gift to nurture that soul."
"What are you going to do?" I asked in fear of his answer.
"I'm just going to question her, that's all."
He put his hands out in front of him.
"Are you going to come with me?"
I gulped back the tears. Petunia had such a big heart. He was right. She'd gone through some extreme measures before to keep her animals safe. But extreme as killing? But she didn't really kill him if the bees did it. I looked down at the stack of bowls.
"She didn't physically kill him herself, but she hired the bees like a mortal would hire a hitman."
Oscar said it like he was truly sold on the idea that Petunia had killed Adam Vedder. I began to pace back and forth. Something was unsettling about the whole thing. This whole story isn't sitting well in my gut. I had to tell him how I was feeling. It was part of my gift, and he needed to know that for his investigation.
"It's because she's one of your best friends. You don't want to believe it."
Oscar stood there, his brows drawn together in a V and his hands on his hips. But I bent down and looked at the stack of bowls. One by one I took them apart. I looked at each one. The remains of the dried rim of the stew remained where the full line was before they ate it up. "Oscar," I gasped and held up one of the bowls. "There's granola in this bowl."
"I bet that's Adam's bowl. The Karima sisters said he'd had granola in his digestive system."
Oscar came over and took the bowl. If he ate granola, someone else ate granola. I showed him the next bowl and smiled. Petunia hates granola. Whoever ate this second bowl of granola is our killer.
"June."
Oscar gave me the cop look that I hated.
"Maybe you need to step away from helping me and let me continue with Colton on our own. You are too close to Petunia to even see the possibility."
I utterly despised when he did this to me during one of his investigations. "Let me get back to my shop and let me read them if they come in. That way we can know for sure if my intuition about Petunia is right and how she didn't do it." I smiled, knowing I was right. It's not like Petunia's going to leave by nightfall like the Audubon Society members.
"Fine." He took the other bowl. "I'm taking these for evidence."
"Fine." I shrugged and threw my arms around him before Mr. Prince Charming and I ran off toward the village. Chapter 16. The news of Adam Vedder hadn't seemed to reach anyone outside the circle of the Audubon Society members. Of course, all the spiritualists in the village knew, but the other tourists didn't. Yet. "How has the morning been so far?" I asked Faith when I got back into the shop. "It's been a little slower than normal." She walked out from behind the counter and bent down to pick up Mr. Prince Charming while I hung my bag on the back of the chair. He loved Faith. His loud purrs proved it while he snuggled his head under her chin. "Why couldn't I have a fairy god cat?" she asked him in a whispering baby voice, careful so the few customers I did have didn't hear her. "He keeps me safe." I patted him before she put him back on the ground. He darted underneath one of the tables, practically taking the red tablecloth with him. One of these days, one of those entire displays is going to come crashing down if he doesn't stop doing that, I groaned. "Any news?" Faith asked. "No. I didn't want to say anything about Oscar's absurd theory about Petunia killing Adam. Oscar only has until tonight to hold the society members. As if on cue, the bell over the shop dinged, and in walked Cindy, Tammy, and Paris. You girls are going to love this shop. Paris was telling them about how she'd come in, and I'd made her a special lotion. The more she talked, the more my gut hit me about her misfortune. Hi, ladies, I greeted them. Look around. I'd love to give each one of you a consultation and pick out the perfect soap, lotion, hair care, or whatever product you'd like for yourself. I told you. Paris wiggled her brows and made her way over to the essential oil section of the shop. Do you need me to stick around? I've got to make the pastry delivery to the Piggly Wiggly in Locust Grove, or Raven is going to kill me. Faith had so many small jobs outside of running the paper. She worked for her sister at the Wicked Good Bakery and did all the deliveries to the local store, who kept her pastries in stock. Go, I'm fine, I assured her. Thank you. Anytime, she called on her way out the door. I watched as the three women went their separate ways in the shop. Each one of them had a need, and all of them were meshing together. I curled my shoulders back and sucked in a deep breath through my nose and out my mouth before my intuition told me to visit Paris first. She picked up the small brown bottles that held the special essential oils and lifted them to her nose. You used the lotion? I asked. I did. Amazing. She had a big smile on her face. Her misfortune hit me. You were going to take Adam Vetter up on his offer to have him pay you, weren't you? I had to clarify what I could sense. I was going to tell him that night when we all started to look for the bird. She turned her shoulder and her body so the others didn't hear her. I really could have used his money. He even offered a job at the zoo. But now, she blinked a few times. I don't know. I thought I'd go see if there were any jobs anyways. Be sure you apply your lotion before you go apply for the job. It was my way of making sure the potion worked and her misfortune turned into a good fortune. I had a good feeling about her getting a job at the zoo. My attention turned to Tammy when I heard her talking to Mr. Prince Charming. There was a sweetness to her voice. My phone chirped. I pulled it from my pocket and looked at the Instagram notification. I smiled when I saw a charming cure had been tagged with a photo of Mr. Prince Charming and a caption from Tammy. Oh, I laughed. Thank you. I showed her my screen. I'm new to Instagram and have no clue really how to use it. It's so much fun, especially for people my age. She held out her hand. May I show you some features? Sure. I handed her my phone and made sure to touch her hand during the exchange to see if I could get a read on her. There wasn't anything, not even a drop of anything she needed. She had an air of confidence about herself, requiring nothing she wanted or needed enhanced with potions. If you tap here, she used the pad of her finger to bring up a part of Instagram I'd not explored. You can see the things your friends you followed liked. Will you follow me? Of course. I was agreeable to anything since I was just learning. She handed me my phone. Great. She gave me instructions on how I could click on her name from the tag where she'd posted the photo of the shop. It took me to her profile. You will click the follow back button. I followed her instructions to follow her back. That's great. I wasn't really sure about all the new social media things and how they would interfere with the magical aspect of our village. If it really got down to business and needed it, we could bring in business with our special gifts, though it was frowned upon by the council. I'm definitely going to keep an eye on your account because I love how you have this shop cat and the products. I have some friends with specialty boutiques that would love to carry your products. Tammy pointed to the soaps, especially soaps and lotions. Those items fly off the shelf. I'm in a few stores and could always use more. I didn't bother telling her about the big box store I was in because I'd love to have her contacts. Anyone I could help with my gift was amazing. The magic worked a little differently with stores. The magic was in the glass bottles themselves. I couldn't be at the stores and create a special potion for the customers when they looked at the bottles, so I had to come up with a way for the bottles to perform on touch. It was like those mood pencils or cups that changed color from the temperature of the liquid. Only the touch of the bottle was able to read exactly what the customer needed, turning the ingredients into magic. If a customer didn't have a specific need, like Tammy, then it was just a nice product for them with a gorgeous and reusable bottle. Can I write my information down? She asked and took one of my business cards from the holder next to the register. Sure. I walked behind the register to retrieve a pen. When I went to hand the pen to Tammy, I saw Eloise rush by with the suitcase in her hand, Petunia following closely behind. "Wasn't that your friend Petunia?" Tammy asked when she'd turned around to see what had gotten my attention. "Yes, she's very upset about Adam Vedder." I went back to focus on Tammy. "I want to thank you for answering Oscar's questions this morning." It was my way of opening up discussions about the murder and seeing if she knew anything. "No problem. I have nothing to hide." She shrugged and turned her attention to the card, where she wrote down her phone number. "If you want to show me the product you think will go best in these smaller retail shops, I'll be sure to take those with me." "You don't mind?" I asked. "Absolutely not." She pointed to the aromatherapy section. "The spa things are pretty popular right now." "You're so knowledgeable about what's popular." I waved her to follow me over to the section. "This is Luna Sugar, named after the moon cycles. I suggest this for women who are having trouble sleeping during menopause." I left out that there were skeever eggs and scully perch in the ingredients that work to cool the body temperature when hot flashes started while sleeping. The moon cycle can have an effect on sleep during those hot flashes. This has a nice lavender scent to help drift off to sleep while the lotion continues to cool the body, so those hot flashes aren't even felt. I uncorked one of the bottles and dabbed some on the back of Tammy's hand for her to rub it in. The Luna Sugar had an active ingredient magical element where the more you rubbed it, the more the lavender scent came out. When the customer rolled in the bed, it activated the scent, helping the customer drift back to sleep. "Did you say help in sleeping?" Cindy walked up behind us and my gut caught. Something there with her was worth exploring. I looked away to gain my composure when I noticed my bag was lit up. Madame Torres had picked up something. "Yes. Do you have trouble sleeping?" I asked. "She never sleeps." Tammy gave Cindy a sympathetic smile. "I've tried every sleeping pill out there. I've been to the doctor. Nothing works." Cindy shook her head. "Not even Mr. Sandman sprinkles," I thought, and immediately wondered about Adam. "Maybe you should try some Luna Sugar," I suggested, and gave her a little squirt. "I'll try anything at this point." She rubbed the lotion on her hand and lifted it up to her nose. "It smells yummy." The smell of raisins and walnuts filled the air around her, which told me this was the next potion I was to create. The potions took on the smells of items customers loved, and apparently she loved raisins and walnuts. "Since you don't live here, I'd love to create a larger bottle for you, and in a bottle you'll love. Same price." I gestured for her to follow me over to the shelf of empty bottles. "You can pick out the bottle you love." Her eyes looked across the shelf. "Touch them. Let one speak to you," I encouraged her, because it was how the bottle would let me know it was specifically meant for her. She must have taken what I'd suggested very seriously, because we stood there for a couple of minutes while she began to pick up every bottle and hold it. If you can't tell, I really want to sleep. She looked at me and put one of the bottles back on the shelf. "I understand. I want you to sleep too, so I'm going to make up a big batch for you while you look," I said. "Take your time." I left her standing there to pick out a bottle and headed back to the counter, where I grabbed my bag off the chair as I walked behind the partition. I flipped the cauldron on and took Madame Torres out of my bag while I waited for the pot to heat up. "This one true eye beckons me to see the things I cannot see, to hear the things I cannot hear, but to give me the sight that I hold dear." Madame Torres's voice held a monotone when I took her out of the bag. The iridescent colors of the spangled came in waves as she repeated the words again. "This one true eye beckons me to see the things I cannot see, to hear the things I cannot hear, but to give me sight that I hold dear." "What are you saying?" I tried to decipher the word rhythm she gave me. It was how she communicated, and it was up to me to figure all this out. When she didn't answer me, and the colors continued to roll like the waters in the ocean, I knew she was talking about the spangled and seeing something. "Is it the binoculars?" I asked, and recalled seeing Darla's sketching of binoculars in the margin of the Magical Cures mystery book. My gut clenched, letting me know I was on the right track. "Thank you," I whispered to Darla. "You were so wise beyond your years." I grabbed the Magical Cures book, and the pages flew open to where I'd seen Darla's cute pictures. Even though Darla didn't have the spiritual gift, she did have the vision of things I might need in the future, because I truly believed she knew her life here on this earthly world wasn't going to be long. She could put different herbal ingredients on the page along with things they would help. And by her drawing binoculars and the campfire on the page of the Wisp Cap salt, I knew it was one of the ingredients I had to put into Cindy Sam's lotions. I ran my hand down the ingredient shelf behind me. Wisp, wisp, I repeated until I saw the bottle give off a faint glow. I grabbed it and also grabbed the Mr. Sandman Sprinkles bottle. I have a plan. I uncorked the Wisp Cap salt and put a few dashes into the now bubbling cauldron. I'm going to give Cindy the potion she needs to help her sleep before she leaves, and extra Sandman for now. I knew I had to go look in her room at the Full Moon Resort before she left, and wondered if that was the dream Amethyst had last night and had slightly referred to this morning. When I put the big pinch of Mr. Sandman Sprinkles in the cauldron, the moving and swirling potion that was red had turned pink with lime green accretions in the bottom. It smelled like raisins, and when I put my finger in to taste, it was the walnut flavoring Cindy Sam seemed to be longing for. "I've got the one I love," Cindy Sam's voice echoed through the shop. I ran my hands down my pants and hurried to the shop floor, where I found her standing next to the shelf of empty bottles with the iridescent blue and purple bottle with a bird feather etched on it. "Maybe we didn't find the spangled smoky Momoko here, but I can capture my adventure in Whispering Falls as a success with this beautiful bottle." Her words caused me to suck in a quick breath. Had she just confessed to Adam's murder through her subconscious? "I'll be right back. I'm going to fill your bottle." My hand shook when I took the bottle from her. My intuition didn't give a definite answer to whether or not Cindy Sams had committed the murder, but there was one thing I did know, and that was that she wasn't one bit upset Adam Vetter was dead. "I'm telling you," I told Oscar on the phone after the three women had left. "None of them were upset. None of them have a bad conscience about it either."
"Then maybe Webster did do it after all," Oscar suggested, with a tone in his voice that made me question him.
"What's wrong?" I asked him while I finished up cleaning the shop and restocking the shelves so we'd be ready for opening in the morning.
"There's not clear evidence on who did this. Looking at it as a spiritualist, Petunia is the #1 suspect because she knows the bees and she's protective of the souled animals. But as a lawman on the mortal side, there is not one piece of valuable evidence that would convict any of them." He stopped talking.
"What are you trying to say?" I asked.
"I think I'm going to have to let the time lapse and call in mortal services." I could feel the defeat in his tone, and it pained me to my core. "I've kept them as long as I can. Colton and I have gone over everything we have, and nothing is a clear shot at who murdered him."
This wasn't unusual for a typical murder in a mortal world. Sometimes these types of murders took weeks, if not months, to solve. But in our magical world, we were pretty quick at being able to solve crimes. Not instantaneously, but within a few hours or just a couple of days at the most. "I'm sorry." I didn't want to tell him about my one last-ditch effort of going back to the Full Moon Resort and follow up on my hunch to look into everyone's room. But I wasn't about to let Oscar go down and give in without a good fight. I gathered my things and ran my hand down Mr. Prince Charming. "Come on," I told my cat and put my phone in my pocket. "We have some snooping to do at the full moon." Chapter 17. It's about time you got here. Amethyst had met me at the door of the Full Moon Resort. She pulled me inside of the resort. "I thought you were going to miss them leaving." "Oscar's been by, huh?" I knew I would cut it close to the time limit Oscar had been under with keeping them in Whispering Falls. "I really wish our laws applied to mortal laws." "Don't we all?" she reiterated. We had a rule in Whispering Falls when it came to crime. Spiritualists were still allowed to run their shops and do everyday activities, but they weren't allowed to leave the village until the crime was solved. Unfortunately, the Audubon Society members were mortals, and their laws stated they could only be held for questioning for 24 hours, which was technically until midnight, but that wasn't going to happen, especially since Webster had already consulted with a lawyer. "Tell me what you dreamed." I looked at my watch. It was already dusk, and soon all the shops would be closing, making the suspects leave since there was really nothing to do after hours. "I was making granola. I hate granola. I never make this stuff." She patted her belly. "Gives me gas." When I heard there were some bowls at the camp with granola, I knew it had to be related and made me sick with worry these guests were going to leave without you getting a good lead. She stuck her hand out toward the outside. "You must go look in their rooms before they go. The only one that hasn't left is Cindy. She must still be packing, but the others have gotten their things together and are meeting their bus at the Gathering Grove tea shop at 9 p.m. That certainly doesn't give me a lot of time. I looked at the 3 lines to gauge the final resting place of dusk and where the night will fully come, which was generally around 9. But you did say Cindy was still here? I did. She gave me the side eye. Did you? I did. In fact, when I made the potion for her, it smelled of raisins and walnuts. My words were met with a gasp from Amethyst's gut. Granola! Her eyes grew big. You have to go there first. She practically shoved me out of the resort and down the steps. She's in the big oak. Of course she is. It was my most favorite of all, and I'd put Mr. Sandman sprinkles in there the other day. Did she not sleep that night either? So I hurried along the way, looking back a few times to see if Mr. Prince Charming was following me. There was no sign of him, and Madame Taurus was lighting up in my bag. I ran my hand over my wrist as I turned down the trail to make sure I had my protection. The singing nettles had long gone to sleep, and they were slumped over, snoring silently. I guess it's just me and you guys, I told the fireflies as they darted in and out of the trees, giving light to the path ahead of me and the guest treehouse coming into vision. I stood down at the steps to see if I could hear or see any movement. Go up and check, I told the teens. They formed a line, circled the house, and came back, forming an arrow, a sign for me to go up. Cindy, I called out, just in case the teens were wrong and it wasn't safe. It's me, June Heel. I held the door open but did not go inside. I'm here to make sure you don't miss your bus back. I was met with the worst snoring you'd ever heard. Cindy Sams was sound asleep, catching up on some much-needed rest. The lotion I'd made for her was on the nightstand. It looked as though she'd started packing her suitcase and decided to take a rest, and that was when the Mr. Sandman had probably kicked in. If the Mr. Sandman worked now, why didn't it work at camp? I questioned. You couldn't have killed him. No way. I stood over her, watching her take deep breaths in and out. I glanced around the room, looking for anything. Nothing appeared to be out of order. She was very tidy. But you knew Adam was allergic to bees, I said to her, as though she could hear me. You were married to him, and if you had any ill feelings about him being here... I shook my head and walked over to the desk to see what was there. A stack of bird magazines and the guide she talked about earlier. Her binoculars sat upright on top of them. I picked them up and looked through them. Wow! I jerked them down when the power was too overwhelming for my eyes. Webster was right. These things could be good for nosy neighbors. When I put them down, I noticed some crumbs on the ground around the trash can. What is that? I picked up the can and looked in it. Raisins, walnuts, oats? I gasped when I realized the ingredients that were thrown away were granola. I held the garbage can in my hand and walked over to her sleeping body. I pulled my phone out with my free hand and called Oscar. Oscar, I think Cindy didn't eat the stew at camp. She ate the granola with Adam because she knew he didn't eat stew either. The two of them had a fight in his teepee. She was going in there to confront him about why he was there. The theory was rolling off my tongue. What if she pretended to let it slip that she'd seen the bird go down the bee trail, knowing what Petunia had told the group? She was married to him, so she knew he was allergic, making the bees the perfect murder weapon. When he left the cane there, she cut him off at the path and knocked him in the head with his own cane. This gave her some assurance that the bees would find him. There was honey on the end of the cane, so she shook the hive next to his passed-out body, and that's when the bees got him. That was a mouthful. And why did you come to this conclusion? He asked. Long story short, I made a potion for her earlier that smelled of raisins and walnuts. Amethyst had a dream about granola. We know 2 people ate granola at camp and not stew. One of those was the victim, and the other was the killer. I found granola in Cindy's treehouse. It was the very shortened version. Why didn't you say you found the granola? He asked. Where is it? I've got it in the trash can from her room in my hand. She's napping, but I can get her up. I think the others have already gone to meet the bus at the Gathering Grove. I looked over at her, wondering how this waking up thing was going to work out. I'll meet you at the Gathering Grove. Oscar clicked off the phone. I hurried out of the treehouse and down the steps with the trash can in my hand. The lightning bugs were having a field day in front of me, darting in and out, making a nice little runway of lights for me. Amethyst, I called out to her once I got to the clearing on the trail. I need you to hold on to this trash can for Oscar. But go wake up Cindy so she'll know to meet her group. And don't do anything to the room. It's a crime scene. I held up my thumb to let her. Chapter 18. There was really no time to spare to get to the gathering grove. Dusk was upon us, and I had to make sure the bus had stopped and that Cindy didn't beat me or Oscar there. After I made it down the trail and to the far end of the main street, I could see there wasn't a bus in front of the gathering grove, so I took a second to look into the Glory Bee to see if Mr. Prince Charming was in there while Petunia did her evening closing ritual, which involved treats for all the animals. It was something Mr. Prince Charming never missed. All of the Audubon Society members were inside of the pet shop and gathered around the tree in the corner. The tall tree was actually a stunning sight to see. Petunia was sweeping the floor. It was part of her closing rituals. She smiled at all the Audubon Society members who oohed and awed over the live tree. I could hear them talking about the vibrant green leaves and beautiful birds of all shapes and colors. Webster was busy taking photos, which told me Oscar had given it back to him. They all laughed when the hedgehog and squirrel batted a nut between the two of them as they sat under the tree. See, we all can get along. Cindy Sams looked at the group. This trip might not have been successful as we'd hoped, but I think we've collectively come much closer as a group, and that can only make us stronger. It was almost time for Oscar to show up, and for me to expose Cindy Sams for what she was, a murderer. Mr. Prince Charming ran over to them. He did figure eights around all of their ankles. I'm so sorry, I apologized as I walked up behind them. He must be saying goodbye. Wow! Mr. Prince Charming bounced up on his hind legs and clawed at Tammy's bag, ripping a hole in it. Oh my gosh, I gasped and smacked my hands together. Mr. Prince Charming scurried up the tree and made it to the tallest branch. I'm so sorry. Tammy grabbed her bag where he tore the hole and tried to piece it together. It's fine. She let him off easy. I have no idea what got into him. We all turned when we heard a door open. My heart raced when I thought it would be Oscar, but it quickly dropped when I noticed it was Gerald and Orrin. He had a pot in his hand. Petunia quickly ran over and grabbed it. I had to make you more stew before you left. Petunia walked over to Cindy. You loved it so much at the camp that I wanted to send you some home. Oh, thank you. Cindy took the pot. There was a grateful look in her eyes that led to them tearing up. Wait, I stepped up. You ate the stew the other night? Yes, she shook her head. I had a couple, maybe 3 helpings. It was so good. Petunia was sweet to give me her family recipe. Since I'm vegan, I wasn't planning on eating until Petunia told me it was vegan stew. I wish I'd known. I didn't eat any because I thought it was beef. Tammy frowned. So you ate the stew and you didn't. I looked between them. My eyes darted back and forth as I recalled the bowls and everyone eating them. What about the granola? Granola? Cindy asked. The granola I found in your room. My mind was a fog. That's Tammy's. She didn't have a room, so she stayed with me. The room started to spin around me as the words left Cindy's mouth. Oh. I blinked a few times to get the spinning to stop. Boy, was I wrong about Cindy killing Adam. My phone chirped, and I pulled it out of my pocket, focusing on the screen. I was sure it was Oscar saying he was on his way, but it was a goofy Instagram. My eyes were too foggy to even see what I was doing. I hit the button that I thought was going to make the app not work, but I opened it instead. My nervous fingers hit a few buttons, not knowing what I was doing, and got me to the screen where it showed the items liked by the people I was following. Tammy's popped up. There were so many photos she liked. My finger slipped and accidentally opened one of the photos she liked, and my heart nearly stopped. June, are you okay? The question someone asked me was a blur in my ear. My eyes focused on the caption of the photo Tammy liked. Throwback to the Kentucky Derby, when I had bought this beautiful spangled smoky Momoko feathered hat from Tammy Harp's beautiful shop in Louisville, Birds of a Feather. It cost me an arm and a leg, but no one will ever be able to recreate my gorgeous hat. Suddenly, I used my finger to click on Tammy's profile. As if my thumb and eyes knew what I was looking for, my finger scrolled her photos until it stopped on one. The one I'd seen when I was with Ophelia. The one with a man in it. I used my fingers to enlarge the photo because what I didn't see before was clearly there now. Just a tiny bit of the man's cane was barely in the corner of the photo. The gold beak of the carved bird head told me it was Adam Vedder, and the date of the post informed me how Tammy Harp knew Adam before she even joined the Audubon Society, like 2 years before. My mouth dried. I couldn't even swallow. I slid my phone back into my pocket.
June, are you okay?
Oscar, standing next to me, was talking to me, but it was the sound of the granola falling on the floor as it poured out of Tammy's bag that brought me back to life. I'm perfect. In fact, I clapped my hands and took a deep breath. I'm more than perfect. Cindy Sams, it's true that you were married to Adam Vedder and how he'd really changed from wanting to help endangered species to becoming the most popular exotic zoo with his accomplishments, putting your efforts and love on the back burner that led to your divorce. Though you couldn't stand him, it was you that ended the relationship, not making a suspect. I twirled around and pointed to Webster. You might have the most motive to have killed Adam Vedder. I pointed directly at him. He got you fired from your dream job, and though you might be zen and happy now, those feelings still creep up. The thought of you having gotten that winning shot of the spangled smoky Momoko wasn't going to slip through your hands again, especially when it came to Adam being your competitor here. But no, it wasn't you. My finger slid over to Paris. Adam offered you money when he got here to help him find the bird with a little job at the exotic zoo to sweeten the deal. You were actually going to take him up on the offer, so there was no reason for you to kill him, I said to her before I slowly turned to face the real killer, Tammy Harp. You are new, the newest member of the Audubon Society, but not to Adam. I took out my phone and got on the Instagram app. In fact, you and Adam Vedder have been an item for the past couple of years. I wasn't completely sure if what I was saying was correct, but my intuition told me I was spot on, and my words flowed to express it. I held up the photo.
That's ridiculous, she scoffed at me and rolled her eyes. You can't even see who is in that photo.
I can't see his face, but I can see his cane, which he told me was made especially for him on a trip to Madagascar, where he saw his first spangled smoky Momoko in memory of his winning. I watched as her face contorted, giving me the full satisfaction that I had the real killer right in front of me. I also know that it was your shop, Birds of a Feather, that sold the last known hat to a woman who wore it to the Kentucky Derby. Though I do not believe you want to poach them, I believe that you have been working at Adam's exotic zoo as the fundraiser coordinator. Out of the corner of my eye, I could see Oscar get on his phone, and he was fact-checking everything I was saying. You have access to a lot of wealthy people from the fancy boutique you owned, and those people would contribute to donating big bucks to an exotic zoo, especially if they had their names tied to it. I believe Oscar can fact-check that the name on the photo of the woman with the spangled feather hat on is the same person the spangled smoky Momoko exhibit at Adam's Zoo is named after for their biggest donation. I knew I had her at this point.
Just because people that I know donate money doesn't mean I killed someone.
She laughed, mocking me. No, but Adam had you join the society to have you spy on what they were doing. He knew he couldn't join because the two people who hate him most are members, and they didn't know you, making you a perfect spy for him, especially when he wanted to get his hand on the spangled. When he showed up here because he couldn't take the fact that you might see it, that sent you off the deep end, and minutes before he was murdered, you and he had a fight in the teepee where you sent him off on a wild goose chase down the path where Petunia had just mentioned was full of bees and their hives. I jutted a finger at her, you knew he was allergic to bees, and if you knocked him out long enough for the bees to swarm him, it would look like he had an allergic reaction, then death.
You're a lunatic. I'm going to sue you, Tammy screamed at me. If anyone had a motive to kill him, it was her.
She pointed at Cindy. But it was the granola that tipped me off to you. I pointed to the pile of grains on the floor. You see, there were 2 bowls of granola eaten at the camp that night. 2 people didn't have the stew, Adam Vedder and you. I smiled, knowing neither of them had fallen asleep from my Mr. Sandman sprinkles. Though I couldn't tell them that, I knew I had her.
He was going to make me look stupid in front of the big money donors, and I wasn't going to let him do that.
Tammy started chirping like the spangled smoky Momoko that appeared in the hole of the tree behind her.
Tammy Harp.
Oscar stated her name and took the cuffs off his police utility belt.
You have the right.
His words were a blur, since everyone had forgotten about her when they focused on the magnificent bird who'd decided to make his big debut while his killer was brought to justice. Adam Vetter was as much a fame-seeker as the Spangled as he was in the living mortal form. But when another Spangled appeared next to him, the group went crazy. What? My jaw dropped and I looked at Petunia. Eloise knew there was a female. She went to get her and brought her back here so they could mate for life and bring the species back. Petunia smiled and explained exactly why Eloise had a suitcase, plus how I'd seen them earlier hurry past my shop. Chapter 19. There are a lot of people I'd like to thank. Cindy Sam stood at the podium in front of the Preble Exotic Zoo's Spangled Smoky Momoko exhibit. First and foremost, Adam Vetter, my ex-husband. He saw a vision for the Spangled a long time ago that I never could. It's amazing how the one thing that tore us apart while he was living now has brought us back together in his death. She turned around and tugged on the long velvet cord next to her. The velvet curtain between her and the new exhibit fell to the ground. Behind the glass was an exact replica of the Whispering Falls forest where the architects of the zoo and the Zoological Association, along with the Audubon Society, had spent weeks perfecting our little part of the world for the new home of Adam, the Spangled, and his new bird bride. Both Spangled birds were up on a limb in a nesting bowl. I'd also like to thank the following organizations who have helped us get to this point. Cindy read off a slew of names and businesses that she'd spent a good part of the last few months getting on board with financing and donations since she'd found out Adam had left the entire zoo to her. I cannot forget to thank the Village Council of Whispering Falls for allowing these organizations to come visit so we can make our soon-to-be Spangled parents a wonderful home for their family. Gerald, Petunia, Isadora, and Chandra all stood up and waved to the crowd. They'd tried their best to dress as the mortals, but the pointy shoes and the A-lined skirts, along with Gerald's attempt not to wear his mustache in handlebar style, did not make a good cover. I know Adam would have been so proud of this exhibit. We haven't saved the entire species yet, but we will, one egg at a time. I give you Preble Exotic Zoo, the Adam Vetter Spangled exhibit. She stepped out of the way. The zoo crew took the podium away, and Adam, the Spangled, stood on the edge of the nest. With the bride inside the nest, he uncurled his wings and showed off the iridescent feathers they were known for. Just as cocky as a bird as he was in life, I leaned over and whispered to Oscar. Oscar was busy bouncing Oren on his leg to entertain the toddler. Petunia and Gerald had asked Oscar to watch him while the ceremony was going on, since they had to sit in the front with the other guests of honor.
I'm glad he came back as the bird. He's made all his wrongs in this world right.
Oscar always saw the good in people, and that was why I loved him so much.
Whoa, not yet, little buddy.
Oscar held on to Oren as the boy tried to get away. Bird! Oren flapped his arms like wings. Bird! He yelled, getting the crowd's attention, making them all turn to laugh. Petunia put her arms out. Oscar let go. Oren ran into his mother's arms. She took him up to the glass of the exhibit and whispered something in his ear. Do you think she's teaching him to talk to animals? I asked Oscar.
Or do you think he's going to read tea leaves?
Oscar looked at me and smiled.
What do you think our little baby's spiritual gift will be?
He placed his hand on my belly. Shh, I warned him. I've still not told anyone.
This has been A Charming Misfortune, a cozy paranormal mystery, Magical Cures Mystery Series, Book 12, written by Tanya Kappas, narrated by Karen Savage. Copyright 2019 by Tanya Kappas. Production copyright by Tanya Kappas.